Hi everyone, I am Dream Into Wealth. I know people watching this are trying to fall asleep. How are you? And I hope you are okay in life. Listen to my story and make yourself comfortable. Also, if y'all like this kind of stories, please don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. The fire crackled low, tossing shadows against the side of an old cattle wagon. Rain whispered steady on the tin roof, soft enough to let the flames do most of the talking. And there, sitting cross-legged by the fire, was old Jeb Holleran, the kind of man who looked like he'd been carved out of dust and grit. His beard was silver, his hat older than most men regrets, and his eyes had that tired peace that comes from losing near everything once or twice before learning how to keep what matters. He took a long drag from his pipe, exhaled slow, then spoke, voice rough as tumbleweed on gravel. "Son," he said to the younger fella across from him, "money a lot like rain. Folks think they gotta chase it, but truth is it falls on everyone sooner or later. Trick is knowing how to catch it without drowning." The boy, fresh out of his 20s, boots too clean, dreams too loud, leaned in. "So how'd you catch yours, Mr. Holleran? You got a ranch now, a business in town, a wagon that don't squeak, and I heard you don't owe nobody a dime." How'd a cowhand turn into a man with a ledger fatter than a Sunday preacher donation plate? Jeb chuckled, slow and genuine. Didn't happen by luck, and sure as sin didn't happen by hurrying. You see, I used to think like most young bloods figured money came from working harder than the next man. But that ain't true. It comes from working longer and the right thing. Most men quit digging the second they hit dry dirt. They don't realize the gold usually one more shovel down. He poked at the fire with a stick, sparks jumping into the rain. "Let me tell you how I learned that lesson. Weren't no easy trail." He told of a time when he was younger, just another broke drifter wandering from mine to mine across the desert ranges of Arizona. Back then he'd sell his sweat to anyone who'd pay $1 a day digging, hauling, raking his back from sunrise to dusk. He'd save a little, lose a lot, and spend the rest on whiskey he couldn't taste anymore. Didn't know it then, he said, but I was trading my time for nothing. A man only gets one kind of gold that can't be mined, his hours. Once you sell them too cheap, you start forgetting what they're worth. One dry summer, work ran out. He wound up in a ghost town about Driftwood, just a saloon, a half-buried church, and a bank that hadn't seen a deposit in 10 years. He'd been sleeping behind a blacksmith shed when a storm rolled through, flooded half the place. When the rain stopped, he saw something strange glinting under the water, a busted lockbox washed out of the old bank cellar. Inside was a ledger, soggy but still legible, full of notes from a man named Ezra Pike, banker, from what he could tell. The pages were full of calculations, lists, and short phrases scrawled in the margins. Interest is patience paid in coin. Never buy what you ain't willing to keep through a drought. Every dollar a worker, treat it lazy, and you'll end up feeding it instead of the other way around. I must have read that old book 100 times, Jeb said, eyes gleaming faint in the firelight. Didn't know it then, but Ezra Pike was teaching me finance before I even knew what the word meant. I started small, saved every coin I could, but not in a jar. Put it to work, bought a busted wagon, fixed it, sold it for double. Bought two next time, then a horse, then another. Didn't gamble, didn't borrow. Every bit I made, I split half for saving, half for building. Weren't much at first, but slow money, the kind that lasts. The boy nodded, trying to catch every word it might fall through the cracks. "So that how you built it, little by little," Jeb smiled. "Ain't no other way that stays built. See, the world will always tell you to make it fat. But fast money burns like dry grass, bright for a second, gone the next. Real wealth, like oak wood, it catches slow, burns long, keeps you warm through every storm." The rain picked up out tapping against the roof like the world itself was listening. Jeb leaned back, eyes half closed, remembering after Driftwood I headed east. Took what I learned and started buying cattle. Not a whole herd, just the weak ones nobody wanted. Fixed them up, fattened them, sold them fair. Folks laughed, called me the ragpicker rancher. But every fool steer I saved was another coin in the pot. 5 years later, I wasn't the broke drifter anymore. I was the man buying the land others walked off of. The boy frowned. "Didn't anyone try to take it from you?" "Oh, plenty tried," Jeb said, chuckling. "Had swindlers, rustlers, and bankers knocking at my door, all smiling the same way snakes do before they bite. But I had one rule: never sign nothing you don't understand, and never rush what can wait a night's sleep. The world moved too far for its own good. Let a man wait a day, and half his mistakes fix themselves." He tipped the pipe ash into the fire. "That's the trouble with young folks and money. They think wealth a race, but it ain't. It a road. You don't win it, you walk it. And the only way to keep walking is to rest when you need to, spend when it matters, and keep your pockets lighter than your conscience." The boy didn't speak for a while outside. Thunder grumbled far away, rolling slow over the plains. "So you're saying anyone to do what you did?" he asked finally. Jeb smiled, slow and sure. "Anyone with enough patience. World ain't short on riches, son. It's short on folks willing to wait long enough to deserve them." He leaned back, eyes on the fire, and for a long moment neither spoke. The storm moved off toward the hills, leaving behind only the soft hiss of rain on grass. Then Jeb muttered half to himself, "Funny thing about money, it don't make a man rich. It gives him time to figure out what already did." The boy sat there long after Jeb had fallen asleep, the fire glow flickering low, the rain steady. In his head, Ezra Pike's old phrase echoed over and over, "Interest is patience paid in coin." He didn't know it yet, but that line would follow him the rest of his life, the same way the hum of rain followed the fire that night. Years passed before the boy, whose name was Eli Mercer, saw old Jeb hollering again. By then, the kid wasn't much of a kid anymore. He'd traded the shiny boots for one scuffed and scarred, learned that dust gets everywhere whether you like it or not, and carried the kind of quiet in his eyes that comes from losing the battles and winning the ones that matter. He wasn't rich, not yet, but he was steady, and that Jeb used to say was the first kind of wealth worth keeping. He'd taken Jeb lessons of seeds and planted them in the soil of his own days, started small, same as the old man, fixed up saddles and wagons, resold them for a little profit, then moved on to trading cattle. Not the prime stock, mind you. He didn't have the money for that. He bought the thin ones, the ones standing wrong in the rain, eyes dull from neglect, ain't much different from people he used to tell himself. Most just need feeding, watering, and a bit of faith. By the time his hair turned the color of desert straw, he owned his own patch of land, a modest spread on the edge of town that folks called Mercer Bend. It weren't grand. The house leaned a bit, the fences were never straight, and the barn roof had more hets than stars in the winter sky. But it was his, paid in full, earned with time instead of luck. He had enough money to feed his stock, pay his hands fair, and sleep without worrying about who might come collecting at dawn. And maybe that was the richest kind of living there it was. One autumn evening, the sky turned a color between whiskey and fire, and Eli found himself riding back home through the long grass. The town had grown since his youth. New stores, a train stop, even a telegraph line buzzing like a restless hornet. But the land still smelled the same rain-soaked earth and sage. He could almost hear Jeb's voice in the wind, slow and thoughtful. "Never buy what you ain't willing to keep through a drought." When he reached the ranch, one of his hired hands came running up from the barn, hat in hand, eyes wide. "Mr. Mercer, you'd best come quick. There's a fellow waiting by your porch. Says he knows you from Driftwood." Eli frowned. "Driftwood?" he muttered. He hadn't heard that name in years. Thought it washed away with the rest of his youth. He tied up his horse and walked up the path, his boots crunching on the gravel. The figure sitting by the porch was old, slouched, wrapped in a long coat that had seen better decades. But when he looked up, there was no mistaking that grin. Even in son Jeb rasped, a twinkle still hiding behind all that gaze. "Heard you been catching rain better'n most." Eli laughed soft surprise, full of something he hadn't felt in a long time. "Well, I'll be damned. Thought you'd gone and turned a legend by now." "Not yet," Jeb said, leaning back in his chair. "Legend don't get sore knees when the weather changes." They shared a quiet chuckle, then silence settled easy between them. Like two rivers meeting without fuss. The rain began dead a drizzle at first, tapping gentle on the roof. Eli poured 2 cups of coffee and handed one over. "So," he said, "what brings you back this way?" Jeb took a sip, smacked his lips, and sighed. "Reckon I came to see if what I taught took root."
I spent most of my years preaching patience to men who thought time was their enemy, wanted to see if one of them learned to make it a friend. Eli smiled faintly. "You taught right. I listened, built slow, spent slower. Ain't rich by city measure, but I sleep sound." Jeb nodded.
That more than most millionaires can say he set his cup down, the rain growing steady outside. But letting it tell you something new, boys. See, saving, earning, that the first lesson. The second one harder. It what you do once the coin starts filling your pockets. Eli raised his eyebrow.
I mean investing?
Investing, giving, living all the same when you do it right. Jeb said, "Money like fire, son. It'll warm your house or burn it down, depending on whether you feed it or watch it too close. Most folks who get rich forget that money ain't a thing to hold. It's a thing to move. It meant to breathe."
"You keep it locked in a box too long, it starts to rot." Eli thought on that. "So what do you reckon a man should do?" "Spread it where it grows, but not where it shows," Jeb replied. "Plant your profits in things that last longer than you. Land, mines, mercy. A coin spent on teaching a child will outlive any cattle deal. A man who feeds his neighbors don't go hungry. The rain drummed harder and thunder rolled low across the plains. Eli leaned back, hat tilted against the porch rail. "You always did have a way with words, old man," Jeb chuckled. "Ain't words, son. It's scars talking. Took you 60 years to figure out that getting rich don't mean owning more. It means needing less." For a long moment, neither spoke. The storm was full now, wind sweeping through the grass in great silver waves. Lightning flickered over the distant hills, turning the world gold white for a breath.
Eli felt something stir deep inside him, a quiet truth that no number or ledger could hold. "You know," he said softly, "sometimes I think wealth merely for a spiegel side. Some numbers for a second. I'm not sure. As I heard. They sat there till the fire inside the house burned low and the rain thinned to mist. Jeb rose slow, joints creaking, and reached out to shake Eli's hand. "You done fine, boy," he said. "Reckon I can rest easy, knowing the lesson stuck." Eli squeezed his hand, voice rough. "You already gave the world plenty. Go rest easy anyway." Jeb tipped his hat, stepped into the darkness, and was gone before the next lightning strike lit the road. But his words hung in the air, lingering like smoke long after the rain stopped. Money worth something only when you can stop counting it and start counting on yourself. Eli never saw Jeb again. But come every rainy night, when the wind sang low and the world moved slow, he'd sit on that same porch, listening to the storm, and swear he could hear the old man voice humming somewhere between thunder and peace. Years rolled on a slow thunder over the plains, and Eli Mercer grew into one of those names folks said with quiet respect. He never became the richest man in the territory, truth be told. He never aimed to be, but he became the kind of man people trusted. His word was worth more than a signature, and his handshake was good that any bank seal. They've had him honest Eli, which always made him chuckle. Ain't honesty that rare, he'd say. It patience wearing boots. He built his life like Jeb had taught. One coin, one fence post, one sunrise at a time. Every dollar that came in went somewhere that made something else grow. He lent money to a few neighbors when the rail lines cut their fields in two, asked for no interest but plenty of good work in return. He hired the hungry instead of the rich, trusted the ones who'd been kicked down instead of the ones wearing clean boots. And somehow, the more he gave, the more came back. Like the rain Jeb talked about, pouring may it please, but always finding its way home. By the time Eli hit his 50s, Mercer Bend had turned from a lone ranch into a small town of its own. There was a school, a blacksmith, a feed store, and even a library built out of the old barn where Jeb once told him that first story about patience and gold. It wasn't fancy books piled on wooden crates, oil lamps flickering through the night, but every soul in town knew that library held more wealth than the bank had wood. Eli didn't run for mayor, though folks begged him to, and got the temper for politics, he said. Too many men talking when listening would do. Instead, he spent his days walking the fields, checking fences, and helping anyone who asked without needing to be asked twice. The way he figured it, good fortune was a wild horse. You didn't tie it down, you just kept feeding it and hoping it stuck around. One day, a stranger rode into town. Young man, city slick hair, suit too fine for the dust road he came down. Said his name was Harold Pike, great-grandson of Ezra Pike, the banker whose waterlogged ledger Jeb had found all those years ago. He'd heard the story of the rain ledger can of that book had changed a drifter into a legend. He came looking for it, thinking there might be a lost fortune tied to it. Eli laughed when he heard, "That ledger ain't made of gold, son," he said, "but it made gold worth something. I don't know what it is now. Jeb left with it far late I know. Maybe it found someone else." Harold frowned, disappointed. "So all those notes, the formulas, the equations gone." Eli leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. "You can write a man lessons on a page, but they don't mean nothing till you bleed a little learning them yourself. You want Jeb's secret? It's simple. Take care of time, and time will take care of you." Harold didn't understand, not then. He left a week later, his fancy boots caked in mud and his pockets lighter than when he arrived. Eli watched him go, shaking his head. "Some folks think knowledge treasure," he muttered, "but it ain't worth a nickel without patience to spend it." That night, rain came again, thick, heavy, the kind that makes the earth smell like iron and memory. Lead night, Eli sat on his porch, saying ain't always, watching it fall. The rhythm of it hit him the way Jeb's voice used to, soft, steady, true. He thought about all the lessons that Ledger had taught him without being his, and how maybe that was the point. Wealth didn't belong to a man, it passed through him like a story, like rain. Years later, when Eli was old and gay, a young woman named Clara came to Mercer Bend. She was working her way west, trying to escape city debts and dreams that had turned sour. She came looking for a job and found Eli instead, sitting on the porch, same spot he'd sat every rainy night since Jeb left. "You a muck a stall?" he asked her. She nodded, though she hadn't. "Then you're hired." Turning out she learned quick. had the kind of grit Eli respected. Before long, she wasn't just helping on the ranch. She was listening, asking questions, taking notes the way he once had under that storm in Driftwood. Eli sat on his porch, sane aid always, watching it fall. The rhythm of it hit him the way Jeb's voice used to, soft, steady, true. He thought about all the lessons that Ledger had taught him without being his, and how maybe that was the point. Wealth didn't belong to a man. It passed through him like a story, like rain. Years later, when Eli was old and gay, a young woman named Clara came to Mercer Bend. She was working her way west, trying to escape city debts and dreams that had turned sour. She came looking for a job and found Eli instead, sitting on the porch, same spot he'd sat every rainy night since Jeb left. "You a muckastall?" he asked her. She nodded, though she hadn't. "Then you're hired." Turning out she learned quick, had the kind of grit Eli respected. Before long, she wasn't just helping on the ranch. She was listening, asking questions, taking notes the way he once had under that storm in Driftwood. She was sharp, too, saw patterns in the accounts that even Eli missed. "You're leaking profit on grain," she told him once, pointing to his ledger, "buying too much up front. You could invest part of it elsewhere. Make it grow while you wait." Eli laughed. "Sounds like you already know the song, girl." She shrugged. "Maybe, but you hum it better." Over time, Clara became meek kin. The people in town came to her for advice the same way they'd gone to Eli. When he grew too tired to walk the fields, she took over his rounds, carrying that same steady patience wherever she went. And when the day came that Eli finally lay down for the last time, the rain came with him, soft, mournful, grateful. Clara found a small box by his bedside that night. Inside was a folded scrap of old parchment. The edges brittle, the ink faded. At the top, scrawled in Jeb Hollowan handwriting, were 5 words: "Interest is patience paid in coin." Below it, Eli owned writing, "Shakid but firm," and "Peace is wealth paid in time." Clara pressed the paper to her chest, tears mixing with the sound of rain on the roof. She tucked it back into the box, closed it gentle, and whispered, "I'll keep the ledger turning, boss." The next morning, the rain stopped and a sunrise poured gold over Mercer Bend. The fields glistened, every blade of grass shimmering like minted silver. And though the porch was empty, anyone who stood there could swear they heard 2 voices humming low through the wind, one old and gruff, one young and steady, carrying the same unbroken refrain through time itself. Take care of time, and time will take care of you. The wind rolled on, the land breathed slow, and the wealth of patience stretched further than gold could. Years trickled on like a creek that never quite ran dry. Clara kept the ranch alive the way Eli had taught her, steady hands, slow spending, and a heart big enough to share the rain when it came. Mercer Bend changed. Sure, the railroad brought new faces, new troubles, new chays for folks to forget the rhythm of patience, but the hum of that land, the old heartbeat Jeb and Eli had listened to under storms, still pulsed beneath her boots every time she walked the fields. She didn't chase profit. Profit came to her the same way sunlight found the morning natural, earned, quiet. When the other ranchers started borrowing heavy to expand, she stayed small, growing what she could tend herself. Folks called her cautious, even foolish, saying she was wasting time when she could have been getting rich. Clara, with this smile that slow, knowing smile Eli used to wear, and say rich don't mean much if it won't let you sleep at night. Then came the dry years. The rain forgot to bend for near half a decade. Dust rose like ghosts across the plains, and the sky turned white with thirst. Men who'd mocked patience came begging for help. Their banks had foreclosed. Their cattle lay dead in the fields. Their coins turned to rust in empty wells. But Clara, she held steady. She'd save grain, water, even a little coin, just like Jeb Lesson said. She didn't gloat, didn't lecture. She shared. Opened her barn, split her stores, and gave work to anyone who'd hold a shovel. When asked why she risked her savings like that, she answered, "Because a dollar left to rot is worth less than a loaf shared." And just like that, the Bend became a refuge. Families who'd lost everything built new homes near her fields. Children grew up learning about patience, not from books, but from the way Clara moved through the world, measured, kind, unshaken. The town thought her the weather keeper, saying the rain returned whenever she smiled. Maybe it was superstition, maybe something more, but when the first storm broke after those 5 dry years, it came right over Mercer Bend first. The rain didn't rush, it fell like gratitude. Folks stood in it, weeping, holding their faces to the sky. After that, Clara became a teacher of sorts, not in schools, but in fields and front porches. She showed people how to mend more than fences, how to mend their thinking. Money ain't just coin, she'd tell the young ranchers. It's choices made visible. The way you spend shows what you honor. Spend on hurry and you'll buy regret. Spend on care and you'll buy time. They wrote her words down in ledgers, carved them into barn doors, even set a few into stone. It wasn't gospel, but it might that well have been. One afternoon, a boy named Thomas came riding up to her porch. Couldn't have been more than 17 freckles and fire in his eyes. "Miss Clara," he said, breathless, "I heard you once saved this whole town by holding your ground. I want to learn how you did it." She looked up from her sewing and smiled. "Ain't much to teach, son. Learn to listen more than you talk, wait longer than you want, and spend slower than you're told." Ed frowned. "That can't be all." "Oh, it may," she said, "but you'll only believe it after the world proves it the hard way." And sure enough, the world did. Thomas worked for her through the next season, restless as spring thunder. Every time a deal came by, a quick sale, a shiny promise, he'd bring it to Clara, and she'd shake her head. "Don't trust what shines before you know what it costs when it fades." He'd grumble, think she was too cautious. But then one by one, those other deals went sour, and he started seeing the wisdom in her slowness. One night, which a rain pattered on the roof and the air smelled of cedar smoke, Clara told him a story she'd never told another soul. "Little Dwight used to say he heard Jeb's voice in the rain," she said softly. "Said it'd whisper truths when the fire burned low. I thought it was just a tall tale till one night after he passed, I sat out there by the porch and heard it myself." "What'd it say?" Thomas said. She smiled faintly, eyes far away. Said, "Don't aim to be remembered, aim to be repeated." Took me years to understand that meant teaching the lesson, not living forever. Patience don't need a name to last. When Clara grew old, the town she'd built around her was one of the few that never needed walls or sheriffs. Trust did the garden. Her porch became a kind of chapel for wanderers and traders. The fire always burning, the coffee always hot. Some came for wisdom, others for rest, but aught left a little lighter. And every so fond, when a storm would roll in from the west, she'd tilt her head just so, as if listening to something no one else could hear. "Still coming, old man," she'd whisper with a grin. When she passed, it was a gentle thing. They found her sitting in her rocker at sunrise, eyes closed, the first light of morning spilling across her lap. The rain came that same evening, not a storm this time, but a quiet, endless drizzle that lasted for 3 days straight. The townsfolk said the sky itself was bowing in thanks. They buried her beside the porch, near the spot where Eli used to sit, and the whole valley turned out to lay a hand on the soil. Thomas, now grown, took her place at the ranch. He didn't change much, still used her same ledgers, still brewed coffee the way she did, still kept that fire going. On the first night of his own first rain, he heard the wind hum through the rafters. It sounded almost like voices, old and familiar, speaking through the rhythm of the storm. He smiled, glued toward the horizon, and said softly, "Don't worry, I'm listening." The rain answered with a low roll of thunder that felt with laughter. Generations later, folks still tell the tale of the rain ledger of Jeb and Eli and Clara and the patience that outlived them. They say if you stand in the rain long enough out there at Mercer Bend, you'll hear their words carried in the wind, speaking the same lesson that built their fortune and their peace. Take care of time, and time will take care of you. The land still hums it, the storms still sing it. And the wealth that grew from that creed, quiet, deep, eternal still, rolls on like thunder over the plains. Long after the dust of Clara years had settled and the fields had turned green again, Mercer Bend became something more than a town. It became a story that told itself. Folks came from far and wide, not for riches, but for the quiet, for the kind of silence that spoke louder than any sermon, the kind that made you listen to your own heartbeat until you realized how steady life could be if you stopped chasing it. The railroad still passed through, but the engineers slowed the trains when crossing the valley, saying the air there had a weight to it, like the world breathed deeper over those acres. Thomas Mercer, named not by blood but by spirit, carried on the lessons the same way a man carries his father hat. Careful, reverent, but not afraid to wear it out in the rain. He never called himself a leader, but folks started following him anyway. He rebuilt the barns, planted new windbreaks, and taught the children of the valley what he'd been taught. That money, when treated like water, can grow guard or drown men.
Each season, when the first rain came, Thomas would gather the young uns by the old porch and tell them the stories about Jeb, the drifter with a pipe and a heart full of patience, about Eli, who built a Fortune 1 fence post at a time, but Clara, who turned a drought into a harvest. He'd sit there with his boots crossed, voice deep and slow, letting the rain fill in the pauses. All of them had one thing in common, he'd say. They waited right. They didn't rush the weather, didn't fight the time it took. They let life breathe. The kids would ask if the rain ledger was real, if it was still out there somewhere. Thomas would smile and tap his chest. It ain't paper that holds it, it's people. You live right, you write another light in it. You listen close, you'll hear it hum in your own bones. Time it does kept rolling. The town grew a little enough for an inn and a post office, but never so much that it forgot itself. Outsides often came to invest men from cities with polished boots and promises of progress.
They talked fast about expansion, factories, big returns, and bigger risks. Thomas would listen, nod, pour him coffee, and when they finished talking, he'd simply say, "Progress is fine, boys, but patience built this land. We won't trade one for the other." Most left frustrated, some stayed, learned the rhythm, and never left again. Then came the winter of the Great Freeze. Snow fell for 6 straight weeks, burying fences and crops alike. The river turned to glass, and the wind howled so cold it made the iron sing. The telegraph lines went dead, and the supply trains stopped running. The town was cut off, no goods, no trade, no help. Panic came whispering at first, then knocking louder each day. Thomas says everyone in the old barn, the one Clara had turned into a library decades before, the walls groan under the storm weight, candles flickering like they were afraid to stay lit. He stood there in the center, tall and calm, coat dusted with snow. "It's the first hard season this land's seen," he said. "Won't be the last, but you all know what to do."
We wait out what we can't change, and we keep our hands busy till the thaw comes. We ain't fighting the cold, we're outlasting it, and so they did. Families bunked together, shared fires, rationing food. The old wells held, the livestock survived, and somehow no one went hungry.
By spring, when the first meltwater came trickling down the ridge, it found a town still whole, still smiling. The valley turned green again, thick and ed, and the people knew they'd earned it. Not through luck, but through slow, honest endurance. Thomas was older by then, his hair gone white, his hands calloused from a lifetime of weather and work. He'd taken to sitting on that same porch each evening, the one that faced the west where storms like to gather. Folks said he was waiting for something, maybe for the rain, maybe for a sign that his time was near. Truth was, he just liked listening to the quiet hum beneath the earth. He said it sounded that the land remembering every man and woman who'd have walked it with respect. One night just after sunset, a traveler rode in from the north.
Families bunked together, shared fires, rationing food. The old wells held, the livestock survived, and somehow no one went hungry. By spring, when the first meltwater came trickling down the ridge, it found a town still whole, still smiling. The valley turned green again, thick and ed, and the people knew they'd earned it, not through luck, but through slow, honest endurance.
Thomas was older by then, his hair gone white, his hands calloused from a lifetime of weather and work. He'd taken to sitting on that same porch each evening, the one that faced the west where storms like to gather. Folks said he was waiting for something, maybe for the rain, maybe for a sign that his time was near. Truth was, he just liked listening to the quiet hum beneath the earth. He said it sounded that the land remembering every man and woman who'd have walked it with respect. One night, just after sunset, a traveler rode in from the north.
Young woman, dust-covered, eyes-sharp flint. She was carrying a small leather sachet strapped tight under her coat. She asked for Thomas by name. "You don't know me," she said when he answered the door, "but I think I've got something that belongs there." She set the sachet down and opened it. Inside was a worn book, water-stained, leather-cracked, pages yellowed to the color of old whiskey. The letters on the front were barely legible, but Thomas could still make them out. Ezra Pike, 1H72. His breath caught. "The Rain Ledger," he whispered. The woman nodded, found it sealed in a wall of an old bank out in Driftwood. "I read it, and it led me here." Thomas held the book like it was alive. The pages crinkled under his fingers, each line filled with words both strange and familiar, lessons written in ink, same ones that had lived in his bones all his life. At the back was a final entry written in Jeb Holleran rough scrawl. "If this book finds you, keep it turning. Don't hoard it, don't hide it, teach it, live it, let it breathe. The rain don't fall for one man alone."
Thomas smiled slow. Looks like it came home. He gave the woman a bed that night and food for the road. In the morning, when the sky turned gold over the hills, he handed the ledger back to her. "You keep it," he said. "It's yours now. Every generation got to write their own chapter." She frowned. "You sure can't keep what was meant to move," he said. "Just promise me one thing. Don't let the world hurry you." She promised, mounted her horse, and rode off into the sunrise. Thomas watched till she disappeared over the ridge. Then he lit up, hit a single drop of rain fell, hitting the porch rail with a soft tap. He smiled. "Guess you're still watching, old man," he whispered. "Ledger still turning." That night a storm rolled in, gentle but endless, soaking the valley in gold light and memory. Folks swore they heard voices humming through the rain low, kind and full of pride. And when morning came, the grass shimmered with dew that looked a lot like tears. Some said the world keeps spinning bit at places like Mercer Bend. where men and women learned that patience outlasts any drought, and kindness pays more interest than gold it could. Maybe that's true. Maybe the rain still carries their words, rolling through the clouds, whispering to anyone who'll listen, take care of time, and time will take care of you. And somewhere out past the ridges and the storms, the old cowboy voice still hums through eternity, steady, warm, eternal. Years later, when the story of the rain ledger had become more whisper than word, the world beyond Mercer Bend had changed near beyond recognition. The telegraph gave way to the radio and then to voices sent across invisible air. Cities grew taller, clocks ticked faster, and men found new ways to measure worth, numbers flickering on screens instead of coins jingling in pockets. But out in that slow valley, time still moved by the rhythm of rain. The hills didn't hurry, the river still breathed steady, and the people, though older, bus-biz, and touched by the modern world, kept the creed alive. Thomas Mercer passed quietly. Same way all good things end, without spectacle. He left behind no heirs, no grand fortune, no debt. Just a note nailed to the porch post, written in his own even hand. If you found your way here, sit a while. The world would wait, and for a while it did. After him, the bend drifted into what it called the long quiet. Fewer folks came through. The old barns sank deeper into the soil, the fences leaned, and the rain barrels rusted in peace. But then one spring morning, when fog lay thick over the valley, a man in a city suit came walking down the trail, shoes muddied, briefcase clutched that it held his whole life inside. His name was Samuel Pike, great-great-grandson of the same Ezra Pike who'd once written that fateful ledger. He wasn't looking for gold or land, he was looking for himself. Years of markets, mergers, and losses had left him hollow. He'd read the old story of the rain ledger in a book about frontier finance and found himself restless. Something about those lines, interest, his patience paid in coin, had haunted him. He didn't know why. He just knew he needed to find where it came from. When he reached the ruins of Mercer Bend, the place looked near swallowed by time. The understrand funny could prove, but he learned that I just described and scribbled into the soil. The branches leaned and the rain barrels rusted in peace. But then one spring morning, when fog lay thick over the valley, a man in a city suit came walking down the trail, shoes muddied, briefcase clutched, but it held his whole life inside. His name was Samuel Pike, great-great-grandson of the same Ezra Pike, who'd once written that fateful ledger. He wasn't looking for gold or land, he was looking for himself. Years of markets, mergers, and losses had left him hollow. He'd read the old story of the rain ledger in a book about frontier finance, found himself restless. Something about those lines, interest is patience paid in coin, had haunted him. He didn't know why, he just knew he needed to find where it came from. When he reached the ruins of Mercer Bend, the place looked near swallowed by time. The porch still stood, half collapsed, ivy crawling up its bones. The rocking chair lay on its side, creaking soft in the wind. But the moment he stepped onto that old wood, the air changed. The world seemed to quiet itself, like a preacher pulsing for the final verse. He sat down, dropped his briefcase, and for the first time in years listened. No tick of a watch, no hum of a machine, just the slow sound of wind through grass and, faintly, the whisper of rain far off over the ridge. It didn't matter that the sky above was clear. The sound came anyway. He felt it through his bones, deep and low, as if the valley itself was breathing. He stayed there till nightfall, lost between silence and thought. And the stars came out sharp and endless. He spoke aloud. If any of you old souls are still listening, I need to understand what you knew. I've had money, lost it, made it back, lost it again, built companies, broke in, bought more. But I ain't rich, not when it counts. The air was still for a long while. Then, faint a sigh, a voice came, not from the sky or the wind, but from within the hum itself. It wasn't a ghost, not exactly, but the memory of every lesson that lived on that land, woven together like rain threads in mist. You're rich when what you have can't be stolen, it said. You're free when what you earn don't own you. Samuel froze, heart hammering. What are you? Just a man, patience echoing through the years, the voice said. Sit a spell, son. You're running too far to notice what you all be caught. He sat all night and the next day and the one after that. No watch, no ledger, no markets to chase. He just listened. To the wind, to the distant rumble of thunder, to the ache in his own chest slowing its pace. And when the first rain finally came, he didn't run for shelter. He stood there, arms wide, face lifted, letting it soak him through. He laughed, something wild and young that'd been buried under years of numbers. The water tasted like dust and salt and truth. When he left Mercer Bend weeks later, he carried no treasure, only a new kind of quiet. Sold his shares, gave up the city, and used his money to build something that mattered, a small foundation, teaching financial patience to farmers, craftsmen, and anyone who thought wealth meant hurry. He called it the Pike Ledger Institute, but the folks who came to learn that told it the porch. Every lesson began the same way. A few minutes of silence, no papers, no pens. Ain't no point talking about wealth, Samuel would tell him, until you can sit still long enough to feel poor and not mind it. Years later, when he died, they found a note in his desk drawer written in his own hand, the words worn smooth by rereading the old Rain Still Falls in Me. The ledger still turning, money just the echo, patience is the song. The Institute lived on, changing with the times, but never losing its heart. They taught simple truths, compound interest, long-term investing, the beauty of slow growth. But each lesson carried that same old wisdom, passed down from one dusty soul to the next. Wealth ain't numbers, it's breathing room. It knowing how to wait without fear. And every year, on the anniversary of Samuel's first visit to the Bend, they'd hold a quiet vigil out by the river. No speeches, no sermons, just people sitting in the rain, eyes closed, letting the sound do the talking. Some swore they could still hear Jeb Gravel voice floating through the thunder. Ain't about earning more, it about deserving peace. The valley remained empty, but it never died. Travelers still came, ad chasing ghosts, others looking for calm. Each one left with something unseen, an understanding too small to write down but too big to forget. The rain ledger had turned again, not in ink, but in action. Through generations that never met yet shared the same pulse. And when the storms rolled in, as they always did, the wind would carry that same old whisper through the grass and over the hills. A sure ed time itself. Take care of time, and time will take care of you. The rain fell soft, endless, and kind turning the world gold once more. And the hum went on, quiet, deep, eternal. Years moved at dusk through an open window, quiet, unnoticed, and everywhere at once, the world beyond the bend had changed again. Machines roamed where horses once grazed, and numbers flashed faster than the human mind could read. The new age held itself modern, yet men still carried the same hunger, and minds still carried the same hunger as those before them, the same thirst to hold time in their hands, to buy comfort, to cage peace inside of coin. But deep in the far country, where the air still smelled of wet cedar and long patience, the legend of the rain ledger lived on. Not that a book anymore, nor a name on paper, but that a way of living that refused to die. One late autumn evening, a young man named Caleb found himself driving along the ridgeline roads with the kind of restlessness only failure breeds. He'd been a stock trader out, 8 fast hands, faster words, and a head full of charts and numbers. But markets can be cruel teachers and pride an expensive student. In a single year, he'd gone from a man with promise to a man with nothing but questions. So when his car broke down on the edge of nowhere and the sign read Mercer Bend, 3 miles, he took it to fate or punishment. He walked the rest of the way. What he found was hardly a town. A handful of buildings half claimed by vines, a schoolhouse turned to dust, and a lone porch standing proud against the years. The air was thick with the smell of rain, though the sky was clear. He climbed the steps and sat, out of breath, shivering from the kind of exhaustion that don't come from the body. He made an old plaque nailed to one of the posts, words worn but still legible. The world awake. He didn't understand it, not yet, but something in it quieted him. For the first time in months, he stopped thinking about charts, accounts, or the noise of success. He just listened. The wind rolled through the valley, low and even, like a breath older than man himself. And then, faint but clear, he heard a sound soft thunder, though no clouds hung above. It was coming from the ridge, distant and familiar, like the echo of a storm long past. Caleb spent that night under the stars. The next morning, he found the remains of the old library barn. Among the broken boards and mouse-eaten papers, one small shelf still stood. On it, a few ledgers remained, nothing more than scraps, words half faded. But on one page, written in that same old rough hand, he read, "Patience ain't waiting, it's choosing not to rush when the world does." He carried that scrap back to the porch and stared at it for hours. Each line sank deeper than the last. Somewhere between those words, he found what he'd been chasing through all those screens and markets. The markets moved fast, sure, but value, true value, didn't. He realized every mistake he'd made came from hurry, from fear, from trying to force rain from a clear sky. He stayed in the bend for months, rebuilt what little he could, fixed the porch rail, cleared the weeds, and planted a garden where the school once stood. The locals from nearby towns thought him odd, maybe even cursed, but he didn't mind. Every evening, he'd light a fire and read from that scrap until the stars came out. He didn't make plans, he made peace. And in that quiet, patience stopped being idea. It became breath itself. One day, a stranger arrived, a woman in her 40s, carrying a field recorder and a notebook. She introduced herself Amelia Rhodes, a historian working on a documentary about financial folklore. She'd heard whispers about the rain ledger, about the people who'd built their fortunes slow and died with peace instead of panic. "You live here alone?" she asked, stepping onto the porch. Caleb nodded. "I guess I do, though I reckon the place keeps me better company than most people did." She laughed softly. "You believe in the story that there was a real ledger, that it brought wisdom or wealth?" He poked the fire with a stick, sparks rising, like golden ghosts. "I believe it was never about paper. You don't need to read it to know it. You just gotta stop long enough to hear it." They spent days talking to Amelia, asking questions, Caleb answered, in the slow way men do when they ain't trying to be clever. She recorded every word, though later she'd say what mattered couldn't be captured by any device. On her last night, they sat together on that porch and the rain rolled in, the first in weeks. She asked, "If you could tell the world one thing about this place, what would it be?" Caleb smiled through the sound of the downpour. "Tell 'em time of the wealth that grows when you share it. Tell 'em money a fine horse, but patience is the saddle. And tell 'em that to fear the rain, it don't drown you unless you fight it." She wrote every word. Years later, when her documentary aired, it wasn't filled with flashy graphics or experts in suits.
It was just a campfire rain and the sound of a drawling voice telling the story of Mercer Bend, of the ledger that taught men how to breathe again. The world, tired of its own speed, listened. The film spread quiet and slow, the way rain spreads through dry soil, touching people who didn't even know they'd been thirsty. Soon letters poured in from across the world, people saying they'd quit their jobs, slowed their trades, learned to cook, to plant, to wait. A new movement began, not named or branded, just lived. They paid themselves rain holdersmen and men who built their days on stillness and care, teaching their children that wealth ain't how much you hold, but how little you fear losing. Caleb never saw the fame that followed. He passed quietly, same may the others, sitting on that porch with the rain in his lap and a soft grin on his face. When the locals found him, they noted something odd on the table beside him lay a fresh scrap of paper, dry if no storm had touched it. It read, "Ledger still turning. Keep it slow, no one knows who wrote it."
Maybe it was him, maybe it was the wind, but from that day on, every rainfall over Mercer Bend carried a strange sound like pages turning soft beneath the thunder. Some say it's the rain ledger itself, still recurring laughs that live by patience, still humming in the rhythm of honest work and quiet faith. And so it goes, through each generation, through each storm, the same soft promise eaching through the hills. Take care of time, and time will take care of you. The rain never stopped. It just learned how to fall forever. By the time another half-century passed, the rain ledger had become legend proper, half history, half him-mem. Children in schools learned about stock markets and inflation, but out there, under the slow sky of the western ridges, they still learned how to listen to the rain. Mercer Bend no longer showed up on most maps. The valley was smaller now, reclaimed by the land itself, but every so often someone still found their way there. Not the kind of people who came seeking fortune, no. These were the kind who came seeking quiet, the kind who'd grown tired of the noise the world called progress. One of those was a woman named June Ellery. She wasn't old, but she carried the kind of weariness that old years of city living can grind into a person's bones. She'd been a financial consultant once. Numbers, markets, futures, all that dance of predictions and pretenses. She had wealth enough to buy silence, yet never found a moment of it. Her doctor said she needed rest, her mind said she needed redemption. So she drove west until the roads forgot to stay paved, and one dusky evening she stumbled across the half-sunken sign, Mercer Bend, 2 miles. She parked by a willow whose roots curled like old hands into the mud and walked the rest of the way. The air changed. She went. It always did for those who came with open hearts. The wind slowed, the noise fell away, and even her thoughts seemed to grow gentle, as if the land itself was whispering her toward forgiveness. When she reached the old porch, the boards creaked underfoot like the breath of something sleeping. The chair still sat there, rocking slightly, though no one pushed it. June sat for a long while. She didn't move. The sun sank slow, and the horizon burned red, then purple, then gold. She took a deep breath and felt tears she didn't know she'd been holding finally let go. There wasn't any miracle, no thunderclap or ghostly voice, just the quiet company of the land and the soft smell of rain. But that was enough. Sometimes salvation don't come with trumpets. Sometimes it comes with peace. Over the next months, she stayed, rebuilt the fences, cleaned the porch, tended the garden that had somehow kept sprouting wild tomatoes and sage all these years. Locals from the next town over would visit now and then, curious about the lady fixing up a ghost place. She'd serve them coffee and talk easy. Some came for the story of the ledger, others for advice, others just to sit. June never charged, never claimed to know more than she did. She'd only smile and say, "I'm just keeping the rain company." And the rain came often, always gentle, always patient. The folks started saying the Bend had come alive again. Maybe they were right. June began writing letters to strangers, notes left on bus stops and library tables, each one carrying a small line from the old wisdom passed down through the years. Time ain't slowing down, head waiting for you to catch up. Fun folks found those letters and changed their lives. Some ignored him, but those who listened, they learned the same truth that Jeb, Eli, Clara, and now the rest had lived. Wealth ain't out possession, it about peace without panic. One winter night, a great storm rolled through the valley. Rain came down in thick sheets, wind howling hard enough to bend the trees near sideways. The power went out in the nearby towns, and lightning turned the sky white. But at Mercer Bend, the porch light burned steady, an old lantern June had found buried beneath the soil. She sat by it with a notebook open, the same notebook she'd been filling with letters and thoughts since the day she'd arrived. The ink ran where the rain splattered across the page, but she didn't mind. She just kept writing. Words like prayer, soft and endless. Toward midnight, she heard a knock, not on the door, but on her heart. She looked out and saw a figure standing by the edge of the field. A young man, soaked through, clutching a small book to his chest. He looked lost, more in soul than in body. She waved him over, and he hesitated only a moment before approaching storm. "Caught you?" she asked, handing him a blanket. He nodded. Car gave out. "I was driving west. Didn't even know this place was there. Most don't," she said. "But I reckon the rain brings who it's supposed to." He smiled faintly and held out the book he'd been protecting. "Found this in a used shop in Tucson. The clerk said it belonged to a man named Samuel Pike once. Thought it was fiction, but something in it felt real." June wiped the cover clean. The leather was worn smooth, edges cracked, but the title still whispered through the years. The rain ledger, her breath caught. "You read it?" "Not all," he said, "but what I did, it made me stop treading for a while. Made me think about what I'd been chasing."
I thought maybe I could return to where it came from. She smiled through the rain. Then you already did. That night, they sat by the fire as the storm sang outside. June read aloud from the ledger while the boy listened, eyes wide, heart still learning. The words weren't complicated, lessons about patience, generosity, quiet work, but they carried the weight of truth worn smooth by time. By dawn, the rain had eased, and the boy had fallen asleep by the fire. June tucked the ledger beside him, whispering, "Keep it turning, son." When he woke, she was gone. The chair rocked gentle in the wind, and on the porch rail lay a folded note in her handwriting. "Time the only currency that spends itself honest. Don't hoard it, live it." He left the Bend that afternoon, carrying the ledger east. Some say he started his own small school of patience. Some say he became a teacher of slow finance, guiding folks through the storms of greed. But no one really knows, because the story never ends. It just keeps moving, same as the rain.
Instilled, if you stand in Mercer Bend when the thunder rolls low and the rain hums like memory, you'll swear you can hear her voice join in the others, old and age-lay, singing the same line through the heartbeat of the world. Take care of time, and time will take care of you. Is that ledger still turning? The rain still falling, and the story, well, it never stopped. The years that followed June passing saw the Bend fade once again into that quiet in-between place, half dream, half earth. Grass luck over the fences, wildflowers bloomed, had her footprints once pressed, and the porch leaned into the wind like an old man remembering a story he wasn't ready to tell again just yet. But the ledger kept moving, even when no hands turned its pages, because by then it didn't need paper anymore. It lived in the way people talked to one another, the way they built slow and gave often. The lesson had long since outgrown the ink. Down in the towns that skirted the old valley, her story started sprouting up as seeds that lain dormant through 100 winters. A banker who'd once repossessed homes began a program forgiving small debts. A young rancher stopped borrowing against next year's crop and started trading time and labor with his neighbors instead. A teacher named Rosa Ellery, no relation, though she shared June's gentleness, began using the rain ledger as a teaching tale for her class. Each spring, she'd have her students write their own patience accounts, listing not money, but moments, time spent helping kin, hours given to listening, days spent doing nothing but watching the clouds roll. She'd tell them, you can lose coin and earn it back, but time loan pays once. Spend it time, but by the time Rosa grew old, the idea had spread far beyond the county. Journalists came out west looking for the birthplace of what they now called the slow dividend movement. They bought cameras, drones, and microphones, machines that buzzed like impatient insects, but the air of the bend swallowed their noise just the same. One of them, a reporter named Lewis Crane, camped near the ruins for 3 days trying to capture the sound of the rain that locals swore whispered words. On the third night, when the storm finally came, he left his recorder running and sat by the dying coals of his fire. When he played the tape back the next morning, all he could hear was a steady hum and faintly a drawl whispering, easy now, easy. Never published that part. Some truths sound too much like faith to sell in a newspaper. Instead, he wrote a small column titled The Town That Waited Right, describing Mercer Bend not that a ghost town, but that a pulse, a place where time itself seems content to take the long way home. That line caught on. The story spread again through radio, podcasts, and screens bright enough to outshine a sunset, but every time someone tried to make it loud, the message slipped through their fingers. Because the rain ledger had no patience for hurry, it only thrived in whispers. Then, sometime near the century mark since Jeb first found that waterlogged book, a man named Har Pike returned to the valley. He was the last of the Pike bloodline, though he barely believed in family beyond what lived in memory. He'd spent his life working in digital markets, cryptocurrencies, algorithmic trades, a ghost of numbers that flickered faster than breath. But after the crash that cleaned him out overnight, he started hearing about the ledger again. First a story, then as a movement, and finally as a pull he couldn't ignore. He came walking down the same mud path where Samuel, Clara, and Eli had once walked, wearing boots too new for the dirt. The air was heavy with the smell of petrichor, that promise of rain not yet fallen. When he reached the porch, the boards groaned their old welcome. He set down his pack, lit around, and whispered, "Guess I'm home." For weeks, he stayed. Built a small shelter, fixed the roof, learned to cook without rushing. The first few nights were restless, his mind still wired to tickers and updates. But then the silence began to speak. It wasn't mystical. It was practical, plain, the way wisdom always is once you stop arguing with it. He realized that the faster his world had moved, the less it had lived. Every deal he'd made was just another form of running, and running never made anyone rich. It only made them tired. On the seventh evening, the storm finally came, a slow, heavy rain that blurred the line between sky and soil. Harlan sat on the porch, letting it soak his hat and shoulders. Lightning flashed far off, showing the valley the way memory shows a life, bright, brief, truthful. He closed his eyes, and for the first time in years, his thoughts stopped trying to solve anything. They yet were. With the storm past, he pulled a small waterproof tablet from his pack. He opened a blank note and began to type. Not numbers, not forecasts, just words. If patience was a stock, he wrote, it'd never crash. It don't need trend lines or traders, just heart steady enough to wait for rain. Then he smiled, saved the file, and titled it simply, Ledger Continued. Months later, that file would spread online quietly without signatures passed from inbox to inbox. No one knew when it started, but it changed people again. Investors started funding farms instead of futures. Cities began adopting slow finance models, measuring growth in decades instead of quarters. Har had never claimed credit. He didn't have to. The rain did the talking. Lived out his days there in the valley. Never rich, never poor, good enough. When he died, folks found his tablet open beside him, still rooting from the porch microphone. The last entry, typed sometime before dawn, read, Rain falling steady, ledger humming. I reckon patience is proof the world still loves us enough to wait. They buried him beside the others, though no markers stirred. The valley didn't need names. It remembered voices, and every spring since, when the rain sweeps through the grass and the thunder rolls soft across the ridges, travelers still stop for a moment, take off their hats and listen. Sometimes they swear they hear more than just wind, a low drawl, old time, speaking through the rhythm of water. Take care of time, and time will take care of you. The ledger never ended. It just kept breathing in ink, in voice, in rain. And maybe that's what heaven really is. A port somewhere between storms, where the coffee hot, the fire low, and the old cowboy still humming about how patience buys peace better than any dollar will. In the decades that followed, Mercer Bend became what the maps called a preserved site, though no fence less dared cut across that soil. Folks didn't come for tourism, they came for stillness. Pilgrims of pace, they fade themselves, bankers, coders, laborers, dreamers, all wandering west in search of the silence they'd been too busy to notice was gone. The ledger wasn't a thing to find anymore. It had turned into a kind of living weather. Those who arrived talking loud always left whispering. Those who came expecting gold often found peace instead and never once left poor. The government tried to put up a sign one year, Mercer Bend Historical Landmark. The next spring, a flood came through, gentle but steady, and washed that sign down river. No one rebuilt it. Some said it was the land way of saying, names fade, lessons stay. Every autumn, a soft ceremony would happen on its own accord. No organizer, just people gathering on the ridge when the first drizzle of the season rolled in. They'd light small lanterns, sit cross-legged in the mud, and share stories of what they'd let go of that year, debts forgiven, grudges eased, plans slowed. The air would fill with laughter and that low hum that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. The rain always came on cue, never harsh, never brief, just that steady mercy the Bend was famous for. One year, a child asked her mother, "Who made the rain come me first?" The mother smiled, brushing mud from her daughter's cheek. "No one made it, sweetheart. The rain yet remembers what it loved, and maybe that was the truth. Maybe love and patience had a scent the clouds could fall. Time made always marched on, but in the Bend it didn't march so much, men wander." Solar panels grew on the roofs of the nearby towns, drones buzzed above like lazy hawks, and people carried more screens than stories, but every generation still sent one soul west to listen. They'd sit on that porch, hear the creak of the chair, and return home different, slower, wiser, truer. Those trips became rites of passage, pilgrimages of patience. Then one day, a woman named Elira Quinn came driving through the valley in a silent car that ran on light instead of gas. She was a financial philosopher, a strange trade, half scientist, half poet. As her papers on the economics of stillness had earned her fame in cities built on speed, but she was tired of lectures that echoed louder than they meant. She came to the Bend not to speak, but to stop. She found the porch empty, but not lonely. The rocking chair swayed as if someone had that left. She sat down, pressed her palm to the armrest, and felt the warmth that lingered. For the first time in years, her heartbeat slowed enough for her thoughts to catch up. She opened her notebook, wrote one line, and stopped. The line read, "What if growth was measured in rest?" That night, the rain became soft in memory. She didn't write again, just listened. And as she listened, the past began to breathe through her. The voices, the laughter, the footsteps of those who'd sat there before. They weren't ghosts, they were echoes of patience itself, humming through time like wind the wheat. Elira stayed 3 months. When she left her notebook behind, tucked beneath a stone on the porch rail. Years later, it'd be found by a drifter who'd lost everything but his curiosity. The first page was faded, but one line remained legible. The longer you hold still, the clearer the water gets. That drifter would take the line, turn it into a song, and sing it through truck stops and train stations until strangers started singing it back. It became an anthem for the weary, a lullaby for those who'd forgotten how to slow down. Somewhere along the way, the world began to shift again. Economies bloomed slower, steadier. A new generation of thinkers, farmers with code on their fingers, engineers with dirt on their boots, started building systems that valued time, meed much labor. They called it the rain standard. Instead of coins or credit, wealth was measured by hours of good work freely given, by the health of the land, by community credit that didn't need interest to grow. The idea spread like water through roots, quiet, unstoppable. And always, somewhere in those manifestos and meetings, someone would quote the old creed without even knowing where it came from. Take care of time, and time will take care of you. It wasn't long before the Bend became a symbol, not a monument, but a reminder. People didn't build museums around it, they built garden. Wild, patient garden that grew in spirals to mimic the way raindrops ripple on still ponds. No one owned the land, yet everyone tended it. Travelers left seeds instead of signatures, and when rain came, it always did. The whole valley would glitter, thousands of petals gleaming under the gay sky, as if heaven itself had decided to bloom sideways. In the middle of that garden stood the old porch, still leaning, still humming. Some swore they could see the faint outline of figures when lightning lit the ridge. An old drifter with a pipe, a rancher with dust on his boots, a woman with her hands folded gentle on her lap, a young man watching the clouds, not ghosts, not saints, just the memory of every soul who had chose patience over panic. And when the wind passed through, it carried the smell of rain and the sound of their laughter, the kind that comes from hearts unburdened by hurry. The sound wrapped around the hills, slipped through the grass and whispered down to the rivers below, the ledger still turning. At night, when the moonlight painted the wet fields silver, the valley would shimmer its breathing. Travelers camped nearby said it felt like sleeping beside eternity itself, slow, forgiving, alive. Some left prayers, others left promises, but all of them left lighter than they arrived. And so the story continued, unwritten but unbroken, a tale of men and women who traded speed for soul, wealth for wonder, numbers for peace. The rain ledger had become the heartbeat of the world patience, pulsing through the ages like thunder without anger. If you listen close, real close, you can still hear that old cowboy humming somewhere beyond the ridge, sitting by a fire that never quite goes out, smiling that he watches the rain fall soft on forever. They say the Bend never truly sleeps, even when the world turns too fast, when cities choke on their own light, and when men forget the sound of their own breath. Mercer Bend keeps dreaming. The rain comes as it always has, steady, humble, unbothered by what the world thinks progress means. No one owns the place now. It belongs to the patience of things, to the rhythm that never learned to hurry. One autumn morning, a group of children from a faraway city arrived with their teacher. They were part of a digital heritage class, most of them never having seen a horse, much less a place without signal. Their tablets blinked useless in their hands. "Why'd they bring us Sid?" one boy muttered, staring at the porch that had seen more centuries than any of them could count. Their teacher, a gray-haired woman with soft eyes, just smiled. "You'll understand after it rains." They spent the day wandering through the overgrown trails, reading the carved stones that marked nothing but words that kindness. Wait, enough. The children didn't get it at first. They were born into a world where everything came quick, where slowness felt like failure. But their dusk came and the air thickened with that sweet smell of water on the way. A strange quiet settled over them. Then it happened. The first drops fell, not sudden, but deliberate, each one hitting the earth like punctuation in a long-forgotten prayer. The rain came down heavier, the sky grumbling low, and the children did what all who came to the Bend eventually did. They stopped. They didn't talk or record or post. They listened. The teacher knelt beside them and whispered, "That sound you're hearing, let the world remember itself." One little girl, no more than 10, turned to her. "Is this what they call the rain ledger?" The woman smiled. What it became. The book gone, but the story stayed. Every drop a new line, every listener writes it without ink. When they left the next morning, none of the children spoke for miles. But something in their faces had changed, a softness, a thoughtfulness, though they'd heard a secret the world wasn't ready to rush through. Years later, one of those kids would grow up to become a writer, another a teacher, another a policymaker who'd help reshape the idea of success itself. They'd never call it by name, but in their choices, in their pauses, the ledger turned again. Somewhere far from the Bend, in a city that never slept, a man named Miguel Torres sat in his glass office overlooking the electric skyline. He was a venture capitalist by title, a rainmaker by ego. He'd heard of Mercer Bend from a podcast that treated it like myth, something poetic, not practical. But the phrase "take care of time and time will take care of you" stuck in his head like a thorn. Weeks passed and that thorn grew roots. The markets he once dominated began to feel hollow, his winds too sharp to hold. So he booked a flight, rented a car, and drove west until the world went quiet. He reached the valley near dusk, the light gold and thin, the kind that makes the land look older than memory. He stepped onto the porch and looked around. No tour guides, no plaques, just air thick with something unspoken. He sat. The chair creaked beneath him, the sage chair perhaps that had held every soul before him, looking for peace they couldn't name. Then the rain started, soft, slow, patient. He didn't move. When it was over, he found himself laughing, not the kind of laugh that comes from joy, but the one that comes when you finally see through your own noise. He stayed a week, then 2. When he returned home, he sold his firm. It was a small organization that invested not in companies, but in time schools that taught slowness, farms that healed the soil, programs that gave workers days off to do nothing but breathe. He called it the Rain Fund. And in his office, behind the desk that faced no window, he kept a small stone he'd taken from Mercer Bend, carved with one word, wait. The world began to bend differently after that. Slowly at first, the way seasons changed. Corcoran replaced quarterly reports with yearly reflections. Cities built quiet zones instead of malls. A few laughed at it, taught it regression, nostalgia, but the laughter softened when they saw what came next. Fewer burnt-out lives, fewer collapsed economies, fewer souls chasing what they didn't need. The ledger, invisible but unrelenting, had done what no system ever could. It taught the world how to breathe again. And even now, long after the names of Jeb, Eli, Clara, Samuel, June, Harun, and all the rest faded into the soft soil, the rhythm of their truth stayed strong. It hummed in the wires, in the winds, in the way children learned to wait their turn without anger. It was no longer a story told round campfires. It was a condition of the heart, inherited weather. One night, under a moon swollen bright over the valley, a storm rolled in that locals swore was the biggest in 100 years. Rain fell in silver sheets, thunder rolling deep enough to shake the roots of the hills. But if you stood there, really stood still, you'd hear it. Between the crashes in the wind, the sound of pages turning, soft and sure, written not by hands but by time itself. A maybe, just maybe, somewhere out there in that endless rain, the old cowboy still sits, boots propped by the fire, hat tipped low, humming the same tune that started it. His voice mixing with the thunder, his grin carved deep with peace, earned the slow way. Because the rain never stopped, the ledger never closed, and the truth never aged. Take care of time, and time will take care of you. The porch still waits, the wind still hums, and somewhere between the stars and the storm, patience is still speaking, soft, steady, forever. By the time another century slid by, the valley had turned into a myth wrapped in fact. The porch still stood, though no one knew how the wood had outlived storms, floods, and the slow chew of time. Some called it luck, others grace. Scholars came to study it, calling a marvel of preservation, but the locals just shook their heads. And the porch, they said, the patience holding it up. That became a kind of joke across the years. Folks fixing engines, rebuilding houses, or mending lives would grin and mutter, it the patience holding it up. Every time the phrase was said, it carried a trace of that same gentle drawl, like Jeb himself was hiding in the syllable. The rain ledger had turned into a religion of sorts, not one with churches or preachers, but with porches and pauses. There were rain houses built in the big cities now, quiet havoc with nothing but open windows, soft chairs, and the smell of petrichor piped through the air. You couldn't buy a thin inside. The only currency was silence. You walked in, sat down, and gave time its due. People said sitting there felt like remembering an old song you didn't know you'd forgotten. In the schools, they taught children about compound patience the way they once taught compound interest. Every quiet choice grows, the teacher said. Every moment you don't spend in anger earns you more peace tomorrow. The kids didn't laugh. They'd grown up in a world that had learned to slow, to fade, to breathe again. They'd never seen the chaos that came before, only heard stories told like ghost tales around campfires of men who traded faster than they could think, of lives spent running from quiet. The Bend itself had become a sacred place for memory. Pilgrims came not to stay, but to sit. Some brought flowers. Zeb brought nothing but breath. The land welcomed both the same. A caretaker always lived nearby, never the same person twice, though every one of them seemed born for it. No one appointed the Bend that called, and they came. The latest was a woman named Lydia Crane, a descendant of that reporter who'd once camped deer, the one who'd heard the whisper in the thunder. She'd grown up hearing her great-grandfather's story, the one he'd never printed, and she'd promised herself she'd find that sound for real. When she came, she found nothing but what every soul before her had found. Rain, silence, and something stirring between them that words couldn't carry. She tried recording it with modern tech microphones, weather sensors, spectral analyzers, but every playback came out the same static hum in a faint rhythm like a heartbeat. It wasn't until she stopped trying that she finally heard it. Late one night, sitting on the porch, lightning stitched silver through the clouds, the voice came low through the rain. You can't measure what meant to be felt. She froze, tears mixing with the storm. Is it you? She whispered. The wind shifted, the rain softened, and she heard laughter. Not loud, not eerie, just warm. Ain't me, not jut me, it all of us. The ones who waited right. When morning came, Lydia didn't leave. She stayed for years, tending the grounds, collecting stories from travelers, teaching them to listen without needing to record. Folks started calling her the Rainkeeper, and when she finally passed, they buried her beneath the porch itself, saying the valley had earned another voice to hum through its storms. Late one night, sitting on the porch, lightning stitched silver through the clouds, the voice came low through the rain. You can't measure what meant to be felt. She froze, tears mixing with the storm. Is it you? She whispered. The wind shifted, the rain softened, and she heard laughter. Not loud, not eerie, just warm. Ain't me, not jut me, it all of us. The ones who waited right. When morning came, Lydia didn't leave. She stayed for years, tending the grounds, collecting stories from travelers, teaching them to listen without needing to record. Folks started calling her the Rainkeeper, and when she finally passed, they buried her beneath the porch itself, saying the valley had earned another voice to hum through its storms. After that, a shift began to ripple through the world again. Not fast, but deep. Economists started publishing works about temporal wealth, the idea that progress wasn't about acceleration, but duration. They quoted the bend without even realizing it. Long-term equilibrium, they faded, sustainable cadence. But those who'd sat in the valley knew better names. Stillness, grace, peace. A new generation of wanderers began to call themselves timekeepers. They traveled the globe building small communities in the spirit of the rain ledger, self-sustained, slow and generous. They didn't worship the rain exactly, they worshiped what it meant. They planted trees that took decades to bear fruit, built schools which children learned how to listen to wind, and created economies based on gratitude instead of greed. The motto carved into their meeting halls was always the same: the ledger turns with kindness. Centuries after Jeb Holler & Boots first left prints in driftwood mud, the rain ledger had circled the world. It became less of a legend and more of a current, something you didn't have to believe in to feel. Scientists even claimed they could measure change in atmospheric pressure over the bend whenever large gatherings formed there, saying it resonated with human calm. But the locals just laughed at that. It's the patience holding it up, they said again. One final storm rocked the 1000th turn of the ledger. The skies rolled black, thunder shaking the bones of the mountains. Pilgrims filled the valley, hundreds sitting shoulder to shoulder in the downpour. They didn't speak, they didn't film, they just let the rain write its chapter. When the lightning flashed, someone swore they saw shapes in the storm silhouettes of every soul who'd have lived by the creed. Jeb with his pipe, Eli by his porch, Clara with her steady eyes, June and Harrod, Samuel and Lydia, all of them glowing faint through the mist, not ghosts, but guardians of patience. And when the thunder faded, one final voice echoed across the valley, clearer than any before. That ain't the end of the ledger, just the turn of another page. The next morning, the rain stopped, and for the first time in living memory, a rainbow stretched unbroken from ridge to ridge. In its arc shimmered the reflection of the old porch, the rocking chair, and beside it, the faint outline of a man hat tipped low. He didn't speak, didn't need to. The world already knew, because the creed had outlived language, outlived men, outlived even the sound of thunder itself. It had become part of the weather, the bloodstream of the earth. And as long as there was rain, there'd be the whisper, quiet, patient, endless. Take care of time, and time will take care of you. And maybe, just maybe, that all the world had needed to remember. The morning after that 1000th storm dawned softer than anyone could have imagined. The clouds had pulled apart like slow curtains, revealing a sky so blue it near hurt to look at. Steam rose gentle from the fields, and the whole valley shone like a mirror polished by grace itself. The pilgrims who'd stayed through the night wandered the hills in silence, afraid even their footsteps might wake the echoes sleeping in that sacred air. There wasn't much talking, just the sound of water running off leaves, the creak of old wood, and the hush that follows revelation. A young girl named Mara Crane, not more than 14, was among the last to leave. She'd come with her grandmother Lydia journal, still wrapped in the oilskin that had kept it dry through the years. When the rainbow had faded, she climbed up to the porch and laid the journal on the rail. There the old stone once rested. She whispered thank you and turned to go. But just then she stepped down, a gust of wind flipped the cover open, revealing the last blank page. On it, a single line began to write itself slow, like dew forming on glass. The ledger turned zane. Mara froze, breath caught somewhere between fear and wonder. The ink glowed faintly, shimmering like rain in sunlight, and then it was gone so quick she might have thought it a trick of light. But when she picked up the journal, the page felt warm, alive somehow. She smiled, closed it gentle, and whispered, "Guess that my sign." She didn't tell anyone. Some truths live better when they're carried quiet. Years later, Mara became the new keeper, not by appointment, but by instinct. She rebuilt the porch plank by plank, refusing to modernize it, letting each nail rust just enough to remember its place in time. She kept no machines, no lights, only candles and an old kettle that hissed like memory when rain started falling. Travelers came and went, leaving her offerings of poems, sketches, and words that didn't fit anywhere else. She kept mail in a box by the door rug. "Don't rush, feet." It was while that time the world beyond began changing in ways even the old Ben hadn't seen before. Climate had gone strange, storms where there used to be none, droughts where water once ran free. People were scared again, hungry for doctrine, starved for calm. Governments and scientists came to study the bend once more, claiming the valley's unique weather patterns might hold the key to balance. Mara let them come, but only on one condition. They had to sit for hours in silence before they started their work. Most thought it foolish until they tried it. Many left their instruments untouched, crying quiet tears they couldn't explain. One man, a meteorologist named Dr. Hassan Reeve, stayed longer than he'd planned. Perhaps his conversation would have run, and he'd walk the ridges with his notebook, reading the rainfall patterns, trying to make sense of what he called synchronized serenity. But after a while, his notes changed. Equations turned into reflections, graphs into gratitude. He wrote, "Perhaps the weather isn't broken. Perhaps we are. The rain been steady, yet us who've lost rhythm." When he left, he published a paper that would ripple through the scientific world. It wasn't peer-reviewed in the usual way. It was written half in prose, half in prayer. He titled it, "The Patient's Constant." It argued that natural systems respond to harmony, not control, that the calm of Mercer Bend wasn't coincidence, but consequence. Human stillness, he wrote, is the Earth-forgotten climate variable. The paper was mocked at first, then studied, then revered. Whole fields of study sprouted from it: technical ecology, behavioral climatology, stillness economics. Yet through it, Mara never claimed any fame. She stayed in the bend, tending to her little patch of peace. When reporters came, she'd meet in with tea, and that same patient smile every keeper before her had worn. "I ain't got theories," she'd say. "I got time." One winter evening, when the valley slept under a blanket of snow, a young man appeared at her door. He was thin, eyes wild, with that kind of desperate exhaustion that comes from chasing the world too long. "Please," he said, breath fogging, "I don't know why, but something brought me ease." Mara nodded. "It usually does." She gave him a blanket, sat him by the fire, and poured him a cup of rainwater tea. He lit at the steam curling up from the cup like a spirit and whispered, "I ruined everything. My business, my family, my name. I thought I was building success, but I was just building speed." She stirred the fire, listening the way the rain once did for Jeb. "You don't fix speed by stopping cold," she said softly. "You fix it by learning how to walk in." The man stayed through the winter, helping her mend fences and clear the creek. He never asked to leave. She never asked him to stay. When spring came, he built a small bench by the garden with a brass plate carved into it. Rest seer. Time already knows what it's doing. Years later, people would come from all over to sit on that bench. And somehow, no matter the weather, it always stayed dry, like the rain itself respected the message. Mara grew old, Eddie keepers do. One night, as a soft drizzle whispered against the roof, she wrote her final note and tucked it inside Lydia's old journal. The ledger don't end, it listens. Every heart a page, every breath a line. Then he leaned back in the chair, smiled at the sound of thunder far off, and drifted into the safe peace that had claimed all before her. When they found her the next morning, her kettle was still warm, the journal open on her lap. On that same blank page from years ago, beneath the lie that had written itself, another had appeared, written in a hand no human could claim. "Well done, keeper. The rain remembers." and outside, the sky opened up, not in fury, but in gratitude. His storm rolled easy over the hills, humming Joel Hamox, and finding its last verse, the porch groaned, the wind sighed, and from somewhere deep within the storm came that same eternal whisper, take care of time and time will take care of you. The ledger turned once more, slow and sure and ebb, writing itself across the face of the world. Generin folded into one another like pages pressed heavy by weather. The bend remained, same Eden was, humble, watchful, alive in its quiet. No monuments were built for Mara, no plaques or statues. The people who came through said she wouldn't have wanted any. They said the rain itself was monument enough. After that, every droplet that touched that porch carried her memory. Same Ada carried Jeb laughter, Eli patience, Clara kindness, and the long silence of every keeper before her. The journal passed on Ed, though nobody really gave. It seemed the book knew where it needed to go. One day it just appeared on someone's step, or in the glove box of a wanderer truck, or folded between pages of another book in a library that smelled of dust and hope. Some opened it and saw nothing but blank paper. Some saw words shimmer, faint in the grain night dried rain. Others swore they heard whispers while reading the voices of the past, humming old lessons in rhythm with their own breath. However it came, it never stayed. When its reader had learned what they needed, it disappeared again, moving on like a season. In one of those seasons, the world found itself trembling again, not from greed this time, but from fear. Technology had grown fast, too fast, and men were starting to wonder whether they'd built a life or a cage. Machines that could think, cities that never slept, air that hummed with constant connection, all of it buzzed like a wire stretched too tight. And then, without reason anyone could measure, things began slowing. The systems didn't crash, they just paused. Not raking, not failing, just stopping long enough to force people to look up from their glowing screens and remember they had hands, hearts, skies. In that stillness, stories began spreading again about the rain ledger, about a valley where patience lived and the weather answered kindness with calm. Nobody knew how the story started, but they traveled faster than any algorithm would have. Folks began searching for the bend, though few could find it. And those who did, they didn't talk much after. Not because they were told not to, but because words couldn't hold what they'd felt. You can't describe peace to someone who never gone quiet enough to hear it. But the chain didn't stop there. The world, for all its wires and steel, started listening. Companies built pause days, governments rewrote work weeks, and universities began teaching tenable balance. The more people rested, the more they created, not in frenzy, but in flow. Economies didn't die, they steadied. Communities didn't fade, they flourished. Somewhere, an old voice might have been laughing, whispering through the thunder, told you so, but it unfolded. The bend waited unchanged, unbothered, eternal. Rain still came when it pleased, never too much, never too little. The porch still leaned, hummed softly under its breath. Travelers still came, leaving behind trinkets and truth coins, carvings, bits of songs, folded notes with nothing but the word thank you written on them. They'd stay a night or two, leave something of themselves behind and walk away lighter. The valley took their burdens and turned them into wind. Then came a spring morning when the air felt charged again, same way it had the night. Jeb found that ledger long gone. The clouds built slow, tall, deliberate, like the sky was taking its time, remembering something. Down in the valley, a young traveler camped by the creek. We was no different than all the others, lost, tired, searching. But that night rain began to fall in slow silver ribbons. Something different happened. He dreamed of a campfire and an old cowboy sitting across from him, hat low, pipe glowing. The cowboy looked up, eyes bright like the reflection of lightning. "You been hurrying, son," he said, "chasing a life already waiting on you to stop running." The traveler swallowed hard. "How do I stop?" The old man smiled, slow and kind, and stopping that matters at learning to move at the speed of truth. When he woke, the fire was cold, but the rain had carved a small pool near his tent. In its surface, letters shimmered faint. "The ledger turns for you now." He blinked, and they were gone. He spent the rest of that day walking the ridge, unsure if he'd lost his mind or found it. And before leaving, he placed a coin on the porch rail, a plain brass piece stamped with the word patience. He said he'd made it himself, long ago, when he still believed you could mint meaning into metal. "Guess it's yours now," he whispered to the rain. That coin stayed there for years, untouched by rust, warm to the hand of any who dared pick it up. Some said it was cursed, others blessed. The truth may be both. Maybe patience always is a burden before it a gift. Over the next centuries, the Bend became less a place and more a pilgrimage of the heart. People didn't travel there by road anymore. They found it when they needed it, in quiet rooms, in long silences, in the moments before dawn when the mind stops pretending in charge. The rain fell everywhere, whispering that same old line across continents and ages alike. Take care of time, and time will take care of you. And though no one's seen the porch in generations, they say you can still feel it somewhere inside the storm, humming beneath the sound of rain hitting rooftops, carrying the weight of every soul that awaited right, a place beyond hurry, beyond want, where the world remembers what wealth really means. The ledger ain't ended, it never will. It keeps turning, line by line, breath by breath, heart by heart, each of us a word in its long, slow song. And if you listen, really listen, you'll hear it too. The rain falling steady, the earth sighing soft, and that old cowboy voice still humming through forever easy now. Don't rush to good things. They say time itself began to change its gait after that. Clocks didn't stop, but they quit mattering the way they once did. Deadlines became lifelines, meant to keep folks mindful rather than chained. Days stretched, not in length but in weight, each hour heavier with purpose, softer with grace. The world hadn't slowed because it failed, it slowed because it finally understood. Progress had been mistaken for pace. Wealth had been mistaken for more. But now, more people were learning that the richest thing a person could own was a honeyed breath. Stories of the rain ledger kept spreading, morphing like rivers finding new paths. Some told it a parable about balance, others as myth, others still as simple science. But beneath all the telling, the same hum lingered, the same slow rhythm that felt older than wind. You could hear it in songs sung by miners on night shifts, in lullabies hummed by mothers rocking children to sleep, in the soft chant of monks who timed prayer to rainfall instead of bells. It was then if the whole of humanity had begun breathing in sync again, the old melody rising like mist after a storm. It was not perfect, never was, never should be. There were still those who rushed, who tried to own what can only be shared.
Men built machines to bottle patience, programs that promised mindful profit, even networks that streamed the sound of Mercer Rain for a fee. But the funny thing about truth is, it don't sell well when it's genuine. Folks tried to market stillness until they realized stillness don't buy, it just is.
One by one, those ventures folded back into quiet. The world had tried to trademark the rain, and the rain had laughed. Decades rolled like thunderclouds across history. Nations merged not through conquest, but through kinship. Trade was no longer for dominance, but for balance. Economists found new language for what the Bend had been teaching all along, that true wealth was reciprocal. They called that circular grace, and it governed the new world not by law, but by rhythm. You give, you receive, you wait, you grow, you rush, you lose. Somewhere, an old porch creaked in approval. One of the last human historians, if such a title even meant much anymore, was a woman named Naomi Reeve, great-great-granddaughter of Hassan, the man who'd once written the Patience Constant. She was a keeper too, though she didn't call herself that. She lived on the outskirts of the Bend in a cabin built from reclaimed cedar, her walls lined with journals stretching back centuries. When storms came, she'd sit by her window with a cup of rain tea and read aloud from the old words, if they were alive. Maybe they were. The rain always seemed to listen. One evening, while thunder mumbled far off and the first drops began to drum against her roof, she found a new page in one of the oldest ledgers, the one said to have belonged to Jeb himself. She knew every mark of it by heart, but this page was different. The ink shimmered faint, alive, words forming slow and breathing. It ain't the storm that tests a soul, it's the calm that follows. She smiled, tears in her eyes. You're still writing, old man, she whispered. Then, as if answering, a single bolt of lightning flashed across the horizon, followed by the softest roll of thunder, a sound that felt less like noise and more like acknowledgement. Naomi spent the rest of her years collecting those small miracles. Her cabin filled with the whispers of the past, voices caught in jars of rain, faint songs captured in puddles that refused to dry, words only visible when moonlight hit paper just right. When he passed, they found a note kin to her wall, the ledger everywhere now. You don't have to find it, you just have to listen when it rains. And that was the truth that carried the world forward. The rain ledger ceased to be a story about one place and became a pulse that lived inside every being capable of patience, Farmers timed their sowing to songs instead of seasons. Builders stopped rushing walls and started building homes meant to breathe. Even cities, once machines of motion, began to hum softer. Skyscrapers were covered in moss. Roads curved instead of cut. Trains slowed when it stormed, not for safety, but out of respect. Humanity had remembered how to yield. No one knows how long it'd been now. Time don't tally well when it ain't fighting you. But they say, if you stand in the right kind of rain, even far from Mercer Bend, and close your eyes, you can feel it. A low hum, steady and kind, a warmth in your chest that ain't from the air. If you listen long enough, past the wind and the world endless chatter, you'll hear that voice gravelly, patient, old, and thunder itself, saying ain't wealth what you count, son, it what you keep long after you stop needing to count. Then the rain will pick up, filling the silence I applause. And when it stops, you'll know what every keeper since Jeb time has known. There no end to the story, no bottom to the well. The ledger keeps turning not cause we write it, but because we are it. The porch still waits somewhere, maybe in the real world, maybe in memory. The chair still rocks, creaking like a hymn. And if the thunder feels a little warmer, if the rain falls a little slower, well, maybe that's the ledger remembering you. So take your time. Let the storm roll by. Count your blessings slower than your breath. And when the next rain comes, don't hide from you. Step out beneath it. Let it wash the dust off your hurry. Let it write your name into the song. Because you were always part of the story, friend. Always one more drop in the rain that remembers. Long after names dissolved into history fog, the world still spoke the language of rain. It had become the quiet teacher again. Soft, patient, constant. Towns rose and fell, but the rhythm stayed. No matter far the new age stretched into the sky, into the stars, the hum of the earth still carried that slow wisdom from Mercer Bend. There were colonies on moons now, outposts that glittered above silent craters, and even there, men would stop when storms of dust began to swirl and murmur, half to themselves, take care of time, this'll slap. They didn't finish the sentence. They didn't need to. The meaning had already seeped into the marrow of civilization. Now, aboard the first orbital farm station, a small dome of hydroponic wheat floated high above the blue planet. The workers there, distant descendants of old earthbound farmers, still held on to an odd ritual. Before every harvest, they'd release a small mist into the dome, a man-made rain meant to honor the water that birthed their bloodline. As droplets drifted slow across the glass, someone would always hum that same tune, the one no one could trace, though everyone seemed to know. Some thought it the rain song, others the Ledgerheimer. Its melody was low and round, almost a lullaby, like the earth singing back through them. The captain of that station, a woman named Elise Crane, had spent her life studying the cultural lineage of patience. She didn't believe in myths, or so she said. But one sleep-late night, while floating near the dome viewport, she opened a message her mother had left her years before. It was nothing but coordinates and one line. When the rain falls in silence, listen. Elise had ignored it for decades. But that night, the ship's artificial weather system cycled, and the water fell in microgravity. She heard it a voice, faint and warm, drifting through the hum of machinery. In wealth a gathering of gold, child, at the peace you buy when you let go. She froze, her breath fogging the glass. The sound didn't come from the speakers. It came from the rain itself. She watched it hang there, tiny spheres of water, catching light-eyed stars, and swore she saw shapes moving within them. Not faces exactly, but echoes. The memory of men and women who'd once stood on real soil, staring up at the same sky she now floated above. For the first time in her life, Elise felt small, not with fear, but with reverence. She bowed her head and whispered, "I hear you." From that day forward, she made the ritual official. Every orbit before the crew harvested the grain, the lights would dim and the mist would rise. No talking, no movement, just rain falling in space and the hum of 1,000 generations whispering through it. She never told the others about the voice. Some things ain't meant to be proven, they're meant to be passed along. Back on Earth, the bend had long since vanished beneath a lake, whether by nature or design, no one knew. The water was calm, glass clear, deep be patience itself. Locals solved it Hollerin' Lake. They said on quiet nights, if you stood by the shore, you could see light flickering beneath the surface, like a porch lamp swinging in the depths. Fishermen claimed that when rain fell let right, the ripples made the shape of a book opening wide. Scientists dismissed it, of course, but the ones who stayed long enough, the ones who re-listened, They stopped denying. They just smiled, set their nets aside, and let the rain do the talking. Every year, on the anniversary of that last great storm, people would gather by the lake edge. No speeches, no songs, just silence, the kind that hums so deep it feels like prayer. Someone always brought a kettle, boiled lake water over a camp stove, and poured it into tin cups, the air filled with steam and memory. And somewhere between the first sip and the first drop of rain, they'd start to feel it, the soft press of something vast and kind conching over him. Not a god, not a ghost, just the rhythm. The same rhythm that had carried every soul before and would carry everyone after. On one such night, a child named Rowan stood by the shore watching the water tremble under the rain. His mother told him the story of Jeb Holleran, the drifter who found a ledger that never stopped writing. The boy frowned, squinting through the downpour. "So be the book now?" he asked. His mother smiled. "You're standing in it." He didn't understand then. But years later, when he grew into a man who worked the soil, who felt the rhythm of the seasons deep in his bones, he'd remember that moment. And one evening, sitting on his own porch, miles from any city, he'd watch a storm roll in and realize the truth. His every choice, his every pause was another line in that same old story. The rain on his roof wasn't random, it was recognition. And somewhere between the first sip and the first drop of rain, they'd start to feel it, the soft press of something vast and kind conching over him. Not a god, not a ghost, just the rhythm, the same rhythm that had carried every soul before and would carry everyone after. On one such night, a child named Rowan stood by the shore watching the water tremble under the rain. His mother told him the story of Jeb Holleran, the drifter who found a ledger that never stopped writing. The boy frowned, squinting through the downpour. "So be the book now?" he asked. His mother smiled. "You're standing in it." He didn't understand then. But years later, when he grew into a man who worked the soil, who felt the rhythm of the seasons deep in his bones, he'd remember that moment. And one evening, sitting on his own porch miles from any city, he'd watch a storm roll in and realize the truth. His every choice, his every pause was another line in that same old story. The rain on his roof wasn't random, it was recognition. The world had moved far beyond the men who'd started it. But the ledger endured not in pages or prophets, but in pattern. The more the rain fell, the more the world seemed to understand its language. Oceans swelled gently, storms spun slower, rivers found balance. Scientists wrote papers about hydrological empathy, claiming that water reacted differently to human stillness. The few who'd sat long enough in the bend would have laughed and said, "Took you long enough to see one singing plain. Someday even stars would fade, galaxies would scatter, but somewhere, maybe in a place that ain't bound by sky or ground, the ledger would keep turning ink in thunder, signed in patience, and maybe, just maybe, there'd still be that old cowboy sitting cross-legged by a cosmic campfire, hat low, smiling slow, tapping his pipe against a log made of starlight. Told y'all he'd murmur, voice carrying through the void like the first drop of rain in eternity. Ain't no end to this story." Just a mighty long pause, and across the universe, wherever water fell on alien soil, in metal domes or in dreams, it would whisper the same promise it always had. "O daytime, true at mercy, take care of time, and time will take care of you." The story didn't end when the stars dimmed and the galaxies drifted apart. It did change its tone, like a song switching key but keeping the same heart. Long after the last portrait turned to dust and even the old names had slipped quiet into the folds of space, the rain kept traveling. You could find it wherever there was rhythm, falling not just at water, but the memory. The cosmos had become its new sky, and time, well, time had learned to hum along. Somewhere on the far edge of what used to be the Milky Way, a planet spun slow and blue-green, young enough to still be curious, old enough to dream. Its skies boiled with clouds that shimmered faint gold at dawn, and when they broke, they didn't just pour, they sang. The rain that wasn't on earth became soft breath, falling in spirals that left trails of light. They touched the soil. The beings who lived there weren't human anymore, not in bone or name, but they carried the same ache, the same hunger to meet something. They worked, built, and waited, and on quiet nights when the storms whispered through the valleys, they'd gather and listen. They fade that sound, the echo of Holleran. None of them knew who Holleran was, maybe a god, maybe a myth, but the phrase carried weight. To them it meant to be still in motion. That became their creed. They built their lives around it, crafting calendars that weren't made of numbers but of cycles, rain cycles, rest cycles, gratitude cycles. Each turn wrought not by achievement, but by alignment. And though they'd never seen a cowboy, never heard a human voice, their language still carried the lilt of that old wisdom. Easy now, they'd say to one another when impatience crept in. The ledger still turning, it was on. That world that a young philosopher named Kale discovered what he called the waterline. He'd been studying the way raindrops fell in perfect intervals, never too fast, never too slow. He found that no matter where he measured from mountain ridge to ocean plain, the pattern stayed the same. He wrote in his journals, "The rain is aware." His peers mocked him, calling it poetic nonsense. But one night, while watching a storm roll over the horizon, Kale heard a sound that changed everything. It wasn't thunder, it was a voice. Not loud, not clear, but timed. It said, "Wait long enough, and even stars learn to listen." Kale fell to his knees, soaked in the light fall, his chest filled with a calm so deep it bordered on ache. He didn't speak of it for years, but his work changed.
Started teaching not in classrooms, but in gardens, speaking of slow wisdom, the rhythm of patience. His students began to spread those lessons across continents. Before long, his words had become the foundation of a movement. Not religion, not philosophy, but remembrance. They dubbed it the long pause. Every year across that new world, people would stop for one full cycle of rain. No work, no trade, no sound but the weather and the heart. And in those moments of stillness, they swore they could feel something like the very air was nodding in approval. Over centuries, Kale teachings merged with science. The greatest minds began exploring the theory of temporal empathy, that time itself reacts to the spirit of those who live within it. They found evidence, too, when entire regions practiced the long pause, the planet climate stabilized, storms softened, crops grew richer. They ran experiments, but it wasn't data they found, it was devotion. The world itself had started breathing easier. Then one age, long after Kale was gone, a team of explorers digging deep into an ancient meteor strike uncovered something strange, an artifact, small, worn, and possibly old.
Wasn't made of their metals or shaped by their tools. It was a coin, brass, circular, with a sin word etched faint on its surface, patience. The scientists didn't know what it meant. They passed it around, studied it, and finally placed it in a museum labeled simply the unknown token. But when the first rain of the season came, a droplet struck the glass case and rolled slow down the side. As it did, the air in the room shifted, cooler, softer. The coin glowed faint gold, and for just a heartbeat, those present swore they heard a low hum, like the sound of boots on a wooden porch, or the quiet murmur of a man smiling at the edge of forever. From that moment, the coin became sacred. They built a temple around it, not of marble or gold, but of clay, open to the sky. Pilgrims came from every corner of the planet to stand in the rain beside it. No prayers were spoken there, only silence. The sound of droplets hitting the ground became its liturgy, and the wind through its arches, its hymning. Over time, they forgot the artifact name, but not its meaning. They called it the heart of the ledger. Years passed, civilizations rose and fell like tides. The planet people evolved, then transcended, turning into beings of light. Their bodies hung with the energy of thought and memory. They left their world behind, wandering through the stars, carrying the ledger legacy with them. They spread it to others, to worlds that didn't yet know rain, teaching them to listen for patience in their own elements. On one red world they taught wind, on another fire. Each time the lesson was the same, that wealth ain't in what you take, but what you tend. And through all of it, across every corner of creation, the hum never stopped. Sometimes it sounded at thunder, sometimes at waves, sometimes like a still heartbeat in the dark. But it was always there, patient and certain, whispering through the veins of the universe. Take care of time, and time will take care of you. And somewhere, out beyond where light runs out, bay rain turns to gold and silence to song. That old cowboy still sits by his eternal campfire, boots up, hat low, humming under his breath, smiling wide at creation itself. He don't speak much no more. He don't have to. Every drop of rain, every beat of time, every quiet heart already knows the words. They say the hum reached a place even beyond the borders of the known, out past galaxies long gone dim. A light itself seemed to walk instead of run. There was a silence so thick it felt alive. No stars, no planets, just the eight of all things that were, folded into what all the quiet sea. And even there, where time itself had laid down its burden, the rain still fell. Not water, not even in matter, but the rhythm-soft pulses of memory drifting through the dark like a heartbeat that refused to quit. The quiet sea was home to nothing and everything. It wasn't heaven or hell, that's a kind of stillness where stories went when they'd finished their telling, but one day, or what passed for a day in a place that had no clocks, a ripple stirred across that endless dark. It began faint, like the sigh of wind on long grass, then grew, carrying with it a voice, gravelly, warm, slow in wisdom. Reckon it time to ride again, it said. From that ripple rose a figure, not young, not old, just eternal in the way fire looks in the reflection of rain. Boots made of light, coat stitched from the edges of storms, and eyes that held whole constellation blinking slow. He wasn't a man no more, but the memory of one Jeb hollering, or whatever piece of him the rain had decided was worth keeping. Reached down, scooped a handful of starlight, and let it pour through his fingers like dust. Still falling, he murmured, still true. Then he began to walk, his steps sending ripples through the void, each one sprouting tiny sparks that grew into stars. With every stride, the quiet sea brightened, galaxies blooming behind him like wildflowers after a storm. And somewhere in those newborn skies, water began to form, oceans condensing, clouds dreaming themselves into being. It was not creation folks used to think of it. It was remembrance, the universe turning the page once more. When he reached the horizon, the place was silence met song. He stopped, looking out over what would soon become another world. He knelt, pressed his palm to the newborn soil, and smiled. "You'll do fine," he said. "Just don't rush none." Then he leaned back, whistled low, and the hum returned, not from his throat, but from everywhere at once. It rolled across the stars, a melody that sounded the thunder learning to love again, and the first rain of that new world began to fall. The drops carried memory, tiny reflections of everything that had it weighted right. Every keeper, every listener, every quiet soul who dozed chosen patience over panic. The rain fell for eons, and from it life rose, not human this time, not even flesh. Beings made of sound and shimmer, shaped by the balance between chaos and calm. They didn't build cities or machines, they built moments. They measured existence not in years, but in pauses between heartbeats. They knew that to move too far was to forget. And they worshipped no gods, only the rain. One of those beings, curious and bold, one day asked the question that starts every story worth telling. Where did it begin? The answer came not in words, but in feeling, the sensation of boots on old porch wood, of laughter beneath thunder, of pages turning slow in candlelight. And through that feeling, the truth unfolded. It hadn't begun anywhere. It had always been. The rain ledger wasn't a book or a place or even a time. It was the shape of patience itself, the eth that kept the universe honest. Wherever there was stillness, there it lived, and wherever it lived, peace followed. Ages passed in that calm rhythm. The rain spread through countless worlds, teaching each in its own way how to breathe. Some learned through drought, others through flood. But all came to understand the same truth, that life was wealth and time was grace. Across the galaxies, travelers spoke of an old song that came to them in storms, humming in a tongue they didn't know but somehow understood. Some swore it was a ghost. Others said it was the sound of the universe remembering itself. But those who'd once walked near the bend would just smile, whisper, "He's still humming." Yes, he was. The cowboy and the rain had become one story, one song sung across the ribs of creation. Some nights, if you listened hard enough, you could hear the faint scrape of his match that he lit that eternal pipe, the smell of storm and cedar drifting through eternity. He never spoke much anymore, but now and then, when a world forgot what patience meant, he'd let out a long breath that rolled through the cosmos like thunder and whispered the only sermon that had mattered: easy now. Don't fight the fall that ain't growing starts. And so the ledger kept turning. Not written anymore, not read, but lived. Every raindrop, every slow heartbeat, every kindness offered without reason. All of it was ink in that endless book. Time no longer kept count, it kept rhythm. And even in stars blinked out, if creation folded itself into rest, the hum went on steady, merciful, eternal. No one knows what come after the last storm, or if such a thing even exists. But if the end is an end, it won't be silence. It'll be rain, soft, endless rain falling over the porch of forever, with that old cowboy sitting there, rocking slow, watching the whole of existence settle like dust after a long day ride. He'll tip his hat, grin that weather grin, and say, "Well now, reckon that a fine day worked?" Then close his eyes and the universal exhale one last time. A sigh so gentle it turns into song. And in that song will be every life, every lesson, every heartbeat that it chose patience. That how the story will keep going even after stories are done. Because rain don't die, it just changes shape, and the ledger, like time itself, was never meant to end. It was meant to remember. And maybe that's the point of it. Not to win, not to rush, not to gather or lose, but to linger long enough to hear the hum between heartbeats. The quiet promise that started at 8. Take care of time, and time will take care of you. Long after the cowboy last whisper melted into the hush of creation, the rain began to slow, not in sorrow, but in satisfaction, like a craftsman laying down his tools after finishing the final piece. The drops fell wider apart, heavier with meaning, until each one struck the surface of the quiet sea like punctuation at the end of a long, patient sentence. Every drop shimmered for a moment, glowing gold against the void, and then sank, leaving ripples that carried the hum onward through what remained of time. Those ripples drifted, spreading across what was left of the stars, touching worlds still waiting to be born. Wherever they landed, stillness followed. Not the dead stillness of emptiness, but the kind that listens, the kind that waits before speaking. And from that stillness, new beginnings began to rise. The rain was never about endings. It was about the spaces in between, the pauses where life remembered how to breathe. Out in the farthest stretch of that soft little dark, something began to move. It was not a creature, not exactly, but a gathering of memory. A shimmer that held echoes of boots, laughter, and thunder. It was the ledger itself, taking form ed. It didn't need paper anymore. It had learned to write through existence. The hum had become its hand, the rain, its ink, and what it wrote now was new.
Stories not of people, but of patience itself, learning to love. These new stories had no language, no alphabet, just rhythm. Planets pulsed with it, winds carried it, even the light between stars flickered in its time. It wasn't about lessons anymore. The universe no longer needed to be taught. It had become the teaching, and in the quietest corners of eternity, the echoes pulled back on themselves. You could hear a phrase whispering still, though it sounded less like words now and more like comfort. You waited right. The ledger wasn't done turning, though not even after the last galaxies went dim.
Somewhere deep within what folks might once fade forever, a spark flickered, a small patch of darkness deciding to glow. It wasn't grand, not at first, just a murmur of energy, humming that same familiar rhythm. The first rain of a new universe began there, not of water, but of possibility. Each drop carrying within it the faint reflection of the one before, a memory of patience baked into the bones of creation. And when those first new worlds spun into being, they came already humming. No chaos, no rush, just calm born from the memory of a cowboy's slow song. It was like the cosmos had learned its own lesson and wanted to start over right this time. The new stars pulsed gentle, burning slower, lasting longer. Life, whatever shape it take, would be different here. It would grow not by conquest, but by cadence. Each creature born would feel that hum in its go, the reminder that time was not a chain, but a dance. One such world formed near the edge of that new sky. Its surface shimmered with mist, its mountains shaped as waves caught mid-rise. There, rain fell before oceans did, teaching the soil how to listen. And in that rain, faint breath Annette stirred. Don't rush the good things, it whispered, same it always had. The world heard, and so it waited. For centuries it waited through stillness, through storm, through the long silence between suns. And when life finally rose from that patient ground, it carried the rain wisdom in its veins. The beings of that world-slow, luminous kind didn't build empires. They built harmony. They had no word for wealth, only balance. Their currency was attention, their economy gratitude. They farmed clouds and shared weather, teaching their children that the greatest gift you can give another is your time, undivided and unhurried. When they told stories, they told them slow, like lullabies stretched across evenings that never hurried toward dawn. One legend among them spoke of a figure who'd once shaped the stars. They told him the listener. In their murals he was drawn sitting cross-legged by a fire made of rain, a wide-brimmed hat pulled low over eyes that glowed like distant suns. No one remembered his name, but every drop of rain that fell was said to be his thought, gentle, steady, eternal. They didn't worship him, though. They thanked him softly whenever the sky opened. And each time they did, the rain fell a little sweeter, they if smiling back. Over millennia, their world thrived without greed, without rush. Their calendars were measured by storms, their years by the depth of stillness between them. They came to call that stretch the ledger rest, and on the longest night of every cycle, When the skies were heavy with silver clouds, whole cities would go silent, no lights, no motion, just rain and the hum of every heart in rhythm. Some said that if you listened hard enough, you could hear the porch again, the creak of the chair, the crackle of fire, and the soft chuckle of the man who'd once told the universe to slow down. And maybe they did hear it. Maybe that sound wasn't memory at out, but presence, the cowboy keeping watch, his patience reaching farther than time itself. The story had circled all the way back to its beginning, not at a repeat, but at a rhythm fulfilled. The rain that once fell over Mercer Bend now watered whole galaxies, and the lessons whispered under that old roof had become the law of creation. No books remained, no pages to turn. Only rain forever writing across the face of everything that there was or would be. And every droplet, every hum, every quiet breath whispered the same simple creed, the only truth that mattered. Take care of time, and time will take care of you. The ledger was whole now, endless, alive. It no longer needed keepers. It had become what it always aimed to be, the patience between beginnings. The hum that carries meaning long after words are gone. The rain that falls, not to end things, but to remind all that exist why they began in the first place. And so it falls still, somewhere beyond all reckoning, soft, sure, infinite. The last storm, the first story, the same rain. There came a moment, somewhere in the folds between universes, when even the hum began to sound like breath drawn in quiet wonder. The rain that had wandered for eons slowed again, not stopping. No, the rain never stopped, but deepened, thick with age and remembrance. It no longer fell they drops, but that light. A soft shimmer spilling across the skin of new worlds like memory itself. Every speck of dust it touched bloomed into a story. Some becometh the shape of mountains, some became rivers, some turned into the hearts of wanderers yet unborn. And somewhere amid that endless pattern, one small glimmer of gold stirred and whispered, "Easy now, let it grow slow."
The universe had learned to whisper back. It answered not in thunder or creation, but in patience. You could feel it if you listened close enough, the rhythm of everything waiting tether. The hum had become harmony now. Suns burned in time with it, tides obey it, even the great silence between stars pulsed gentle like the breath of sleep. Creation had remembered that it wasn't a race, it was a lullaby. One world in particular shimmered softer than the rest, though it had caught the last echo of the cowboy grin. It spun slow, dressed in oceans that glowed faint in the dark and clouds that rolled like lazy smoke over the plains. The beings that lived there weren't flesh, not exacted, they were shapes of light and sound, woven tight from the same hum that stitched the universe together.
The spirit of it controls the rhythm of everything waiting at it. The hum has become harmony. Suns burned in time with it. Tides obey it. Even the great silence between stars pulsed gentle like the breath of sleep. Creation had remembered that it wasn't a race, it was a lullaby. One world in particular shimmered softer than the rest, as though it had caught the last et of the cowboy grin. It spun slow, dressed in oceans that glowed faint in the dark and clouds that rolled like lazy smoke over the plains. The beings that lived there weren't flesh, not exacted, they were shapes of light and sound, woven tight from the same hum that stitched the universe together.
They didn't speak in words, but in harmonies. When one thought, the others felt it, and the air between them rippled like rain across still water. They called themselves the keepers of pause. They didn't know why. The phrase had come one day soft, familiar, like a word remembered from a dream. Each cycle they lived beneath the bright mists of their sky and shared what they'd learned. Not facts, not discoveries, but patience. They taught their young that waiting was a kind of creation, that stillness was not the absence of life, but its root. And in their music they carried the same rhythm that once rolled across the plains of old earth, the same pulse that hummed through Mercer Bend when the rain first found its song. Among them lived a sing wanderer named Owed. He was different from the rest, not restless exactly, but curious. Where others found comfort in stillness, Owed felt the ache of its edges. He wanted to know why the hum was the way it was, why patience moved the way it did, why the rain never stopped. So one dawn, when the mists hung low and the world seemed to listen hardest, Owed stepped out beyond the borders of their realm. walking toward the deep shimmer where the horizon folded into silence. He didn't take food or tools, for he had no need of either. He took on a question. For ages, he wandered through worlds built of memory, through skies that breathed, through rivers made of sound. The hum was everywhere, soft but sure, like footsteps in another room. At times it sounded close, at times it was distant and dream. Once, while standing on the edge of a storm that spanned half a galaxy, he thought he heard laughter, a warm chuckle, deep thunder. It rolled through him like a homecoming, and he found himself smiling though he didn't know why. "You hen," the voice said, not mocking, not surprised, just fond. Always the curious ones who wander. Owad bowed his head. "What am I looking for?" The answer came slow, like rain finding its way down old glass. "You're looking for the end of patience. Trouble is, there ain't one." The light around him swelled, flickering soft and gold. For a heartbeat, he saw it the shape of the old cowboy sitting by a fire that burned without flame. His hat tipped low, his pipe glowing steady, a small sun. He was older than the stars and younger than the rain. When he spoke again, his words fell like a melody. Ord had always known, but never quite remembered. "A no secret, friend. The waiting is the wealth, the slowing is the saving. You ain't supposed to catch the end, you're supposed to walk beside it." Then the vision faded, leaving only the hum, deep and certain. Ord stood there a long while, his light flickering in time with the rain. When he turned back toward home, the question had changed shape. It wasn't why anymore, it was how long, not as a measure of time, but that a promise to keep. He returned to his people carrying that promise like fire cup in both hands. The ledger, he told them, ain't a book and it ain't a law. It a breath between storms. We don't guard it, we are it. From that day on, they no longer called themselves keepers of pause. They became the ledger folk, wanderers who walked from world to world teaching the same slow truth. Where they passed, chaos softened, rivers calmed, suns steadied their burn. Some called them angels, others myths, but they didn't mind none. They kept humming that same tune, moving at the pace of kindness. Eventually they reached the far edge again, the place that lay thinned into nothing. There the rain shimmered one final time before dissolving into the dark. The ledger folk stood still, heads bowed, not mourning but thinking. They knew now what every soul before him had learned, that patience never ends, it all changes hands. And from somewhere in that bounden quiet, the old cowboy voice rose one last time, rolling gentle tin, the first storm over empty prairie. "Well now, looks like you folks figured it out. Took your time too. Proud of you." Then the rain began again, not from the sky, but from the hearts of the ledger folk themselves, falling in slow golden arcs that lit the dark at dawn. Each drop sang a note, and together they built the hum back into existence, layer by layer, until the whole universe breathed again. It was a new song now, but it carried the same refrain. Take care of time, and time will take care of you. And so it went, and so it goes, forever and always. The rain, the rhythm, the ledger, the weight, the hum that builds worlds and heals them, the porch that never falls, the fire that never goes out, the slow grace of creation itself, remembering what the first storm already knew, that wealth ain't in what you hold, it in how long you're willing to hold, nothing at, and trust it'll grow. They say even eternity gets lonely sometimes, when on the songs have been sung and on the storms have rolled their course, a hush falls, that too deep for words, but not too deep for wonder. Out in that hush, where even the hum itself seems to rest its head for a spell, something started moving. It was faint, like the first tremor of thunder, but the sky decides to rake. A whisper, not from the old worlds or the new, but from between them. A murmur that said, "There'd always room for one more story." From that whisper bloomed light, soft at first, then steadier, shaped by patience. You could almost see it thinking, taking its time. What it made wasn't a world, not yet, but the idea of one. A thought held so gently that it began to glow. The rain came next, like memory remembering how to fall. Each droplet carried the weight of all that had come before, every keeper, every wanderer, every pause. It didn't splash when it landed, it settled. And in that settling, the new story began to breathe. The ledger folk, or what was left of them, watched from beyond. They didn't speak, and they didn't move. They listened. It was the same way Jeb once listened by the porch, the same way Eli used to breathe beside the fire. They knew what was happening. The ledger wasn't starting over. It was opening wider. The universe wasn't turning the page. It was writing in the margins. The new world grew quiet first, then curious, then brave. Its oceans glowed from within. Its clouds hummed softly with the echoes of long-lost laughter. From those clouds, life emerged then, not to conquer or to build, but to wait. They were gentle things at first, like mist and thought combined. They learned to move with the weather, not against it. They thought themselves the children of the calm. Unlike those who came before, they didn't tell their history through words or carvings. They told it through rain. Every generation, they'd gather on the highest ridge, standing beneath the soft storm, and hum the rhythm of their lineage into the downpour. The rain would carry it through valleys, through rivers, through oceans, and wherever it landed, new calm would bloom. Their mutes became the heartbeat of the planet itself. Storms learned to dance to it, lightning curved gentle around it. They listened. It was the same way Jeb once listened by the porch, the same way Eli used to breathe beside the fire. They knew what was happening. The ledger wasn't starting over, it was opening wider. The universe wasn't turning the page, it was writing in the margins. The new world grew quiet first, then curious, then brave. Its oceans glowed from within, its clouds hummed softly with the echoes of long-lost laughter. From those clouds, life emerged then, not to conquer or to build, but to wait. They were gentle things at first, like mist and thought combined. They learned to move with the weather, not against it. They thought themselves the children of the calm. Unlike those who came before, they didn't tell their history through words or carvings. They told it through rain. Every generation, they'd gather on the highest ridge, standing beneath the soft storm, and hum the rhythm of their lineage into the downpour. The rain would carry it through valleys, through rivers, through oceans, and wherever it landed, new calm would bloom. Their mute became the heartbeat of the planet itself. Storms learned to dance to it. Lightning curved gentle around it. Even the wind bowed its head when it passed through their gatherings. One of them, a young dreamer named Asin, was content just to hum. He'd heard legends, faint things passed down in ripples and echoes, about an ancient voice that taught the rain to remember. He wanted to hear it for himself. So one dawn, he climbed the ridge higher than any for him. The mist thinned, and he found himself looking up at a sky that felt alive as though every star was listening. "If you're still out there," he whispered, "tell me what it means to wait right." The answer came in the way all truths come. Not loud, not clear, but certain. The air grew heavy, the rain slowed, and from within the clouds came a voice like the sigh of thunder through a canyon. "You already are." Asin fell to his knees, tears mixing with rain, though he couldn't tell which was which anymore. "But I don't know what I'm waiting for," he said. The voice chuckled, old, warm, familiar. "Ain't about what, it about how. The rain don't ask where it falling, it just does." That's the whole of it. When the storm cleared, Asin found a stone by his feet, smooth, round, and etched with words that shimmered faint gold when the light hit it right. "Take care of time." He carried it down the mountain and placed it at the heart of his village. For centuries after, every new generation added their own stones around it, building not a temple, but a circle, a quiet space that rain could gather and sing. Over the ages, that circle became the pulse of the world. Travelers came from far lands, scholars, wanderers, even spirits from distant skies, to sit in the rain and listen. Some left answers, most left questions, all left lighter, and in the hush after each storm, the same words would hum through the soaked air. You waited right. It wasn't long before the children of the calm realized something profound. The rain itself was changing. It had learned to choose. Sometimes it'd fall on the lonely. Sometimes it'd find its way through drought to a sunflower struggling to bloom. It was as if it knew who needed it most. They called this the listening season. Yeah, time when storms had hearts and clouds carried intention. And though they couldn't prove it, they knew the ledger was speaking again, writing through the weather, same as always. As centuries turned, the children grew into elders and their songs became slower still. They stopped calling themselves children at that, saying, "We've all been rain once." Their world thrived in its silence. There were no wars, no kings, no hunger, only the balance between waiting and growing. They didn't measure age by years, but by storms survived. When one of them passed, they said, "They've gone back to the rain." One dusk, the great silver storm rolled across the plains. Ice and final descendant sat alone on that same ridge. Her name was Lyra. The hum had softened with her years, but she still heard it clear, the first drop on an old tin roof. She raised her face to the sky, smiled, and whispered, "You still out there, old friend?" For a long while, there was only rain. Then came the fainted reply, floating down like a feather from heaven. "Always was, always will be." Lyra closed her eyes. The rain fell harder, not mournful, but celebratory, like applause for patience itself. When it finally eased, she was gone. Her body dissolved into mist. Her hum carried skyward, adding one more verse to the song that never ends, and above that world, beyond even its horizon, the universe smiled. The ledger had turned again, quiet, content, infinite. The universe sighed like a tired horse at rest. The rain rolled on, slow and full of memory, gliding between the folds of stars, falling on worlds that hadn't even been named yet. In its rhythm, there was no beginning, no end, just continuance. A hush stretched so wide it felt alive, a silence rich with all that had been said. From that silence rose a low hum, deep as bedrock and tender in dawn, and out of it came a glimmer, a spark that wasn't light but remembrance. The rain carried it the way an old tune carries warmth across distance. It found its way to a quiet corner of creation, a place so small it could fit inside a whisper. There, in the shadow of a half-born moon, drifted a lone figure shaped from nothing but thought and patience. The form looked up, blinked slow, and whispered, "I remember you." It was the cowboy again, though not in flesh or bone, more a spirit stretched across eternity, stitched together from every pause that mattered. He stood there in the starlight, boots made of memory, hat brim low, pipe glowing faint with stardust. "Well," he drawled, watching the rain tumble in silence around him, "reckon this story don't tire easy." He chuckled, deep and round. "Good 10 I never minded long rides." He took a slow step forward, each footfall leaving ripples that turned into constelling. The rain followed him like a loyal dog. As he walked, he spoke, not to anyone in particular, but to the space between things, the part of the universe that still listened. "You know," he said, "folks used to think stories were for learning, but maybe they're for remembering instead. The rain ain't trying to teach no one, it just wants to be heard." Somewhere behind him, thunder rumbled like laughter. He smiled. "That right, old friend." Still got that kick pause, looked out across the endless shimmer, and tipped his hat. Guess it time to see where else patience can take root. He reached into his coat and pulled out a small leather-bound book. Not the old ledger itself, but a piece of it torn from eternity middle. The pages were blank, gleaming soft, humming with the weight of unwritten grace. He laid it gently on the ground. The rain there around it, its disciples, each drop leaving a word, a sigh, a story. The letters didn't spell much, just fragments of truths. Wait, breathe, trust, mend. He knelt beside it, pressing his palm to the page and whispered, "Write slow. Now, don't rush the end. It always closer than you think." Then he leaned back, watching the pages soak and shimmer until they lifted, drifting up into the air, scattering like petals in a soft wind. Each page became a seed, floating outward, landing on worlds that hadn't even dreamed of life yet. And wherever they landed, patience followed, quiet, invisible, but steady. 1,000 ages passed, maybe more, the seeds sprouted into new ways of being. On one world, they grew into forests that take color with the sound of rain. On another, they took root in the minds of dreamers who could hear time breathe. On yet another, they became songs sung by ocean's tides, moving in rhythm with the hum that began all things. None of them knew they were part of the ledger. They didn't need to. The truth don't demand belief. It keeps on being true. Somewhere in on that quiet creation, a child was born with the sound of rain in her chest. When she laughed, the skies followed suit. When she wept, the thunder held its tongue. She grew up learning to read the world not through sight, but through sound, the hum beneath the hum, the slow pulse between breaths. Her name was Saren, and from the first time she stood beneath a storm, she knew she was part of something vast and familiar. One night, while sitting alone on a ridge that overlooked an ocean of clouds, she felt a warmth near her shoulder, a presence she couldn't see but could feel. The air shifted. The rain began to fall, each drop glowing gold. She whispered, "Who there?" The answer came the same way it always had, quiet but certain. Just an old fool with too much time. Saren smiled, not afraid. "Are you the rain?" A chuckle. "No, I try work for it." The two sat there a long while watching the storm play across the horizon. When Saren finally spoke again, her voice trembled like a leaf in a slow wind. "Why does it keep coming back?" The cowboy voice softened. "Because the story ain't done. You see, the rain ain't just water. It falls so we don't forget what matters when the sun blinds us too long." She closed her eyes. And what happens when even the rain forgets? For a moment, there was the patter of drops. Then came his answer, gentle and sure. Then someone like you remembers for it. When she opened her eyes, he was gone. Only the hum remained, rolling low and sweet through the storm. Saren sat there till dawn, rain drying on her skin like gold dust, her heart beating in time with the rhythm of creation itself. And when she rose, she knew what she had to do. She built no temple, no city. Instead, she walked the world teaching those who hurried how to hear read. She told them to sit in the rain until it stopped sounding wet and started sounding like breath. She said that where the ledger lives in the space between drops. Her words spread like seeds the same way the cowboy had, the same way Jeb did to those lifetimes. And so it began dead. Not a cycle, but a continuation. A conversation stretched across time, whispering through rain clouds, thunder, and hearts that refused to rush. Somewhere the cowboy smiled, his fire still burning, the ledger still turning, the story still singing. And in the hush after every storm, the universe itself seemed to lean close and murmur, as if grateful for its own endurance, "Take care of time, and time will take care of you." The world Saren left behind carried her name, but the song sung under breath, soft, reverent, never shouted. Her lessons weren't written anywhere, and yet they stayed, passed from one soul to another like the way rain teaches soil to bloom. Whole generations grew up learning that patience wasn't the same, standing still. It was moving at the speed of understanding. And when the skies opened up, when storms rolled in slow and deep, children would run outside, turn their faces upward and whisper, "She listened and be." The rain became their teacher, their elder, their friend. The sound of it falling was woven into their language, verbs that meant to wait with kindness, nouns that meant the space between choice and action. It wasn't religion, it was rhythm. Through it the hum endured, steady as a heartbeat, patient as stars. Centuries flowed by like rivers in no hurry. The children of the calm became the people of the rain, and the people of the rain became something grander still, listeners. They built to towers, waged no wars. Instead, they built pools, broad circles of stone carved so precise that each drop of rain echoed like a bell. They'd sit around those pools during the long seasons, listening for messages in the sound. Sometimes they swore they heard laughter in the ripples, sometimes words, but those times they just heard peace, and that was enough. Once in a long while, though, something different would happen. The rain would fall in a strange rhythm, slow, pause, quick, quick, slow, like a knock on an old wooden door. That when the elders would rise, bow their heads and say, "He riding intently."
The cowboy had become a myth among them, though not the tide carved in stone. He was the whisper in the downpour, the ghost in the thunder grin.
When he passed through, the crops grew sweeter, the nights felt softer, and even grief itself seemed to take a breath and wait. It was during one such storm that a young listener named Kyle decided to follow the knock. He'd heard it in his life, those odd patterns in the rain, that rhythm that called like an invitation. But this time it felt different, like the sky was speaking to him. So he set out alone, walking across plains slick with silver water, guided only by the flashes of lightning and that deep, familiar hum. He didn't pack food, didn't tell a soul, he just went, trusting that wherever the rain was leading him was exactly what he was supposed to be. Days blurred into nights, crossed rivers that whispered his name. forests that bent their branches slow, aideth in greeting. The storms never stopped, but they never harmed him either. The lightning curved wide away at his path. I could recognize him. When exhaustion finally took him, he collapsed under a tree that glowed faint with wet light. Before his eyes shut, he heard a voice he'd never heard but somehow always known. "Well, now," it said, "looks like the ledger got another line to write." Cal woke to find himself sitting by a fire. The air smelled like cedar and rain. The ground beneath him dry despite the storm still pouring outside the ring of light. Across from him sat the cowboy, piping in, boots propped up on a log, starshine reflecting in his eyes. "Took you long enough?" the old man said with a grin. Cal tried to speak, but the words tangled in his throat. The cowboy raised a hand. "Don't rush it. Words will come when they're ripe." They sat in silence for what felt like lifetimes. The fire crackled. The rain hissed against it, but never put it out. Finally, Cale found his voice. "You're real," the cowboy chuckled. "Realer than most things that hurry." Cale looked at the rain. "Why me? Why not?" the cowboy replied. "Ledger don't pick favorites, it picks listeners. And you, boy, you got ears tuned to truth." Cale frowned. "Truth? Now, the kind that don't fit on paper." The cowboy leaned forward, pipe glowing soft. "You notice how rain don't argue, don't beg, don't brag, don't barter. It just falls way it needed most. That truth don't need permission to do its work." Cale nodded slow. "And the ledger, that what keeps it honest. Ain't a book no more. It a rhythm. Every act of patience, every quiet kindness, every time someone lets the world breathe instead of pushing it, it writes itself there, and the rain carries it on." Cale sat quiet, the firelight reflecting in his eyes. "Will it stop?" The cowboy smiled. Lines creasing light folded paper. "Then that truth stops. It just changes shape." He leaned back, exhaling a long ribbon of smoke that twisted into the shape of a raindrop before vanishing. "Now, you got a choice, son. You can stay here and rest a while, or you can carry the hum forward." Cale hesitated. "Well, carry it wherever time still needs reminding to slow down." Cale took a deep breath, feeling the hum in his chest, in his bones, in the firelight itself. "I'll go," the cowboy grinned, eyes gleaming with that same age-laced spark. Knew you would. He reached out and tapped Cale's chest with 2 fingers. "Then listen good, 'cause this next part important. Don't go teaching it. Just live it. That how the ledger writes best." When Cale blinked, the fire was gone. So was the cowboy. He stood alone beneath the sky pouring soft gold. The rain soaked him through, but he didn't move. He just listened. Then he smiled, turned toward the horizon, and began walking again, the hum filling him as a heartbeat that belonged to everything. And somewhere, far beyond even the reach of rain, a cowboy voice echoed once more, low and sure of thunder, remembering laughter. "Take care of time, and time will take care of you." The ledger turned again, and the rain began a brand new song. Cale walked until the rain itself forgot it was falling. The world ahead shimmered like a mirage, rivers twisting through fields that glowed soft lantern light, trees minning low with memory. He didn't know where his steps were leading, and for once he didn't feel the need to know. The hum carried him, steady, kind, familiar. Sometimes it grew quiet, like it wanted him to listen deeper. Other times it swelled like thunder stretching its arms. Each note felt alive, and in between each was the silence that tied all things together. He realized then what the cowboy meant. It wasn't about learning to move fast or slow. It was about learning to move true. He passed through places where the sky itself bent low to greet him. Rain fell sideways there, drifting gentle like feathers. He crossed through cities built not of stone or metal, but of sound, old spires, singing harmony, their walls made of echoes. The people there didn't speak, didn't barter, didn't rush. They simply shared silence, like it was currency. When Cale passed, they bowed, not to him, but to the hum that walked with him. He'd tip his head back, hat soaked, eyes closed, and let the rain write its verses across his skin. Days blurred into dreams, and dreams blurred into years. The ledger rhythm was changing, growing softer but deeper, like the pulse of a long-forgotten heart. Everywhere Cale went, life slowed, not in stagnation, but in grace. Crops ripened fuller, rivers ran clearer, storms ended gentling. The hum wasn't that in him anymore, it was in everything. And that when he understood, he wasn't carrying the ledger, he was it. Same as the cowboy before him, same as Saren, same as every quiet soul who had chose patience over fear. They were drops in the same rain fallen from eternity porch, One night, under a sky stitched with silver clouds, Cale found himself drawn toward a sound deeper than any he'd heard before. It wasn't thunder nor wind, it was the heartbeat of the world itself. He followed it through valleys of mist and over ridges that glowed with soft gold until he came upon a clearing. There, in the center of that quiet plain, stood an old wooden chair. Rain hissed against it, yet it stayed dry. The hum was loudest there, rolling like a tide beneath his ribs. Stepped closer, a raindrop paused in midair, of holding its breath. Said a voice, neither young nor old, near nor far. It came from everywhere at once. Cale obeyed, lowering himself onto the chair. It creaked like it remembered 1,000 lives for his. The rain began again, soft, steady, reverent. He looked up, and across from him sat the cowboy, just like before. Same grin, same eyes full of universes, but this time the fire between them wasn't flame. It was rain, rising upward in golden ribbons. "Been a sell," the cowboy said. "You done good." Cale chuckled. "Didn't do much but walk." "That's the trick," the old man said, leaning back. "World don't need fixing, it just needs reminding. And you reminded it fine." Cale looked at the fire rain, mesmerized by how it danced without sound. "What happens now?" The cowboy took a long draw from his pipe, exhaling a curl of smoke that formed the shape of a spiral before melting into the mist. "Now, you rest. Ledger don't end, son. It hands itself forward. You done good." Cale chuckled. "Didn't do much but walk. That's the trick," the old man said, leaning back. "World don't need fixing. It just needs reminding, and you reminded it fine." Cale looked at the fire rain, mesmerized by how it danced without sound. "What happens now?" The cowboy took a long draw from his pipe, exhaling a curl of smoke that formed the shape of a spiral before melting into the mist. "Now, you rest. Ledger don't end, son. It hands itself forward."
"You wrote your parts, someone now. Warham in now."
Cale hesitated. "Will they find you too?" The cowboy smiled slow. "They'll find the rain. That's close enough."
A long pause settled between them. Not empty, never empty, but full of the kind of quiet that can hold whole galaxies. Cale finally spoke. "You'll get tired of waiting?" The cowboy eyes softened. "I used to, back when I thought time was a thing you could run out of. But I learned something sitting through all these storms." He tapped his pipe against his boot heel. "Turns out, the longer you wait, the sweeter it sounds." The words sank into Cale like rain into parched ground. He leaned back, feeling the hum settle into his bones one last time. "Reckon that true?" The cowboy grinned. "Ain't reckon." It gospel lightning flickered across the horizon, not sharp or violent, but graceful, slow, like a painter's final brushstroke. The rain turned to mist, the mist to light. Cale looked down at his hands and saw them glimmering, dissolving into the rhythm itself. "Guess my part over." Then the cowboy tipped his hat. "Parts don't end, boy, they blend." Cale nodded, a quiet peace settling in his chest.
"What should I tell the next one if they ask what it means?" The old man's smile deepened. "Tell 'em this wealth ain't gold, it time earned honest, spent kind and never hoarded. Tell 'em every breath is a storm worth riding through and every pause is a porch worth sitting on. Tell 'em patience ain't the absence of motion, it motion with purpose."
The last of Cale form drifted upward, turning to light and rain. He felt no fear, no loss, only gratitude. The hum rose to meet him, surrounded him, pulling him home. The cowboy watched him go, the faintest tear trailing down his weathered cheek. "You waited right," he whispered, voice thick with pride. When the light faded, only the chair remained rocking gentle in the wind, creaking to the say-slow rhythm that kept the universe alive since the first drop fell. The cowboy stood, brushed the dust from his coat, and looked out across eternity. New worlds shimmered at the edge of the horizon, waiting their turn, reckon. "They'll be needing the rain soon," he said. Adjusting his hat, best get going, he took a step forward. Boots splashing in puddles of starlight vanished into the downpour. The hum followed him, growing softer until it became silence, Ed. The kind of silence that ain't empty, but expectant. Somewhere far off, the first rumble of a new storm rolled. Somewhere else, a child stood up, hearing music in the rain for the very first time. As somewhere beyond all of it, the ledger turned another page. The rain carried on without end, its rhythm older than any star, wiser than any god still remembered. It fell through the seams of space and time, seeding the hush between heartbeats, brushing across worlds still dreaming of names. Where it touched, life stirred, not in bursts of brilliance, but in whispers. There were no explosions of light, no divine declarations, just quiet beginnings, like a sigh from a sleeping child, like the sound of boots on an old porch floor. It was the kind of creation only patience could love. Out in that patient dark, the hum breathed again.
Roll through galaxies, through dust and distance, human slowy forgiveness. Each note held a memory tale walk, Saren's song, Eli last smile, the cowboy gentle laughter. They weren't gone. They just melted into the rain, their stories joining the stream that never stopped flowing. The ledger wasn't a book anymore. It wasn't even a thing. It was everything. Every pause, every choice to wait instead of rush. Every kindness offered in silence. It all wrote itself across the fabric of existence. And in one corner of that grand quiet, that stars still had the scent of newness, another life began to stir. It wasn't human. Humans had been gone so long their names had faded into the hume, but it carried the same spark that had burned on that old porch under stormlight. The creature was made of mist and willpower, shaped from the memory of rain. When it opened its eyes, the sky wept light around it, and if saying, "Welcome home," it wandered for a long while, unafraid, moving through landscapes that seemed to breathe with it. The rivers pulsed to its heartbeat, the winds bent to its steps. Had no name, not yet, but the hum whispered one, for it Terran. The name fit like a coat that'd been hanging on a nail too long, waiting for the right shoulders. Terran didn't know where the notion came from, but he carried a sense of purpose, like a string tied to something far beyond what he could see. When he spoke, the rain answered. When he waited, the earth bloomed. He wasn't powerful in the way old worlds used to think of power. His gift wasn't control, it was alignment. Things just tended to fall into place around him, like the universe itself leaned in to listen. He followed the rain for countless seasons until he found what could only be the center. It wasn't rocked by fire or monument. It was a clearing in the middle of a quiet storm, where the sky never stopped dripping and the air felt heavy with thought. The hum there was different, lower, older, almost shy. Terran knelt, letting the rain pool in his palms. The water shimmered with light, reflecting not his face, but others' faces that weren't faces anymore, but memories of patience. Conceptor lower, one of them grinned, eyes crinkled with that same timeless mischief. "Well now," said a voice, low and familiar, thunder through wood beams, "and you." "Eat." Aside, Terran looked up. The cowboy stood across from him, leaning on his cane. He'd just come in from a long walk. His hat dripped silver rain. His coat glowed faint with starlight. "Don't say much these days," he said, "but I've been waiting on you." Terran rose slow. "I don't understand," he said, waiting. "For me to do what?" The cowboy chuckled deep and easy. "And about doing, son. It about remembering every few etchings someone got to come by and remind the rain what it fallen for." Terran frowned, glancing up at the storm. "You mean it forgets?" "Not forgets," the cowboy said, "just gets lonely." He crouched, drawing a circle in the wet ground with the tip of his cane. "Rain got a long job, you see. Falls for ages, touches all things, but don't get to stay nowhere. Every now and then, it needs someone to look up and say, 'You're doing fine.'" Terran stared at him, the realization settling slow and sure. "You won't want to talk to the rain talk? Listen, hum, whatever fits your heart best. Ledger don't care the shape of your words, long and they're honest. The rain around them deepened in color, turning gold and blue at once." Terran could feel it listening, leaning closer. He took a breath and began to hum low, unsteady at first, then clearer. He found a rhythm. The sound rippled out like rings in water, reaching the far corners of the clearing. Then, beyond, the rain responded, falling heavier, each drop glowing for a heartbeat before sinking into the soil. The cowboy smiled wide. "There you go," Ledger humming clean again. Terran's voice wavered by the emotion hit him. "What happens when I'm gone?" The old man looked up at the sky. "Then the next one will come along, always does. You're just part of the rhythm, boy. Don't fret about the melody." Terran closed his eyes, keeping the hum going, letting it spill through him until it was no longer coming from his throat, but from every part of the world itself. The rain shifted tones, soft, tender, infinite. When he opened his eyes again, the cowboy was gone. Only the chair remained rocking gentle in the storm, empty but not abandoned. He walked to it, resting his hand on the backrest. The wood was warm, humming faint under his palm. He smiled. "You waited right," he whispered. Then he turned and walked away, the rain following him, the hum trailing behind like a loyal shadow. His figure disappeared into the mist, but his song remained woven into every droplet, humming in every pause, written across every world, still learning to wait. The ledger turned again, not with sound, but with understanding. The cowboy fire burned eternal. The porch still stood somewhere, somehow, always. And the rain, faithful and endless, kept falling through the long quiet, whispering to anyone willing to listen. Take care of time, and time will take care of you. A long age passed, and even the rain began to sound different, lower, deeper. Gicket had that 1,000 lifetimes worth of meaning and was pouring it out slow. It wasn't mournful, though. It was content, like a tune hummed after supper by a man who's seen enough of life to love its quiet edges. The ledger had no pages left to turn because it had become the air itself, every gust, every drop, every breath carrying the rhythm that started it. And yet, even eternity knows the feel of anticipation, the hush before something new takes root. In the far stillness between stars, a single droplet of that ancient rain began to glow brighter than the rest. It quivered like a thought about to be spoken. Then it fell down through the layers of memory, through all that air was, into a place so young it hadn't yet learned to echo. Where it landed, the ground pulsed once and came alive. A new world opened its eyes. Oceans formed, mountains rose, and wind exhaled for the first time. But it was not chaos this time, it was grace. Creation had learned the cowboy patience. Every sunrise waited for its moment. Every tree grew at the pace of gratitude. The hum was built right into the bones of things. From that hum came life again, soft, aware, and kind, not made to rule, but to tend. These new beings didn't call themselves anything names felt too small. They lived by listening. Their hearts beat slow, in rhythm with the rain that still whispered through their world. Each one carried a faint golden shimmer behind the eyes, a spark of the ledger late, inherited, unclaimed. Though they didn't know it, they were part of the same long story that started with one old cowboy humming under a tin roof. Among them was one who stood apart, not by pride but by wonder. Her name was Ira, and she had a way of hearing the world a shade deeper than the rest. While others found comfort in the steady rhythm of their days, Ira listened for what came between the beats, the silence that shaped the song. She could hear the storms gather before they were born, could tell when the rain was about to fall, not by the clouds, but by the tremble in her own bones. Some said she was blessed. Others said she was haunted. Ira didn't bother choosing which. She just kept listening. One night, a long, gentle storm passed over her valley. She woke to the sound of footsteps. Not human, not beast, just weight in the rain. She rose from her bed, stepped outside, and saw a figure sitting on a rock under a crooked tree. The firelight from her home flickered over his form, showing the brim of a hat and the glow of a pipe. Her breath caught. He didn't turn at first, just said, quiet and steady, "You hear it too, don't you?" Ira swallowed hard. The hum? He nodded. It changing. Not wrong, just leaning toward something new. Ledger stretching its legs again. She stepped closer. "Who are you?" He smiled without looking up. "Just an old keeper. Been hemming along so long I almost forgot why Era knelt beside him, rain rolling down her face. Why are you he? To see if this world remembers what the last ones learned." He tapped his pipe and sparks flickered like lightning bugs. "Looks like you do." Era frowned. "I don't understand any of this. You don't have to," he said gently. "Understanding what slows folks down? Listening like they am too." They sat there a long while, the rain whispering low, the hum rolling through the earth like a lullaby sung by the sky itself. Finally, Era asked, "What happens when the hum stops?" The cowboy chuckled, deep and kind. "Ain't no stop. Even silence hums if you wait long enough to hear it." Lightning flashed far off, and for a moment she saw his face. Not young, not old, but carved from the same patience as the storm. "Will it always be rain?" she asked. "Rain just how the truth travels," he said. "But someday it might fall lay light, or sound, or even thought. Whatever form it takes, Londa keeps teaching folks to slow down at doing fine." The air thickened, heavy with that strange sweetness that comes before things end. The cowboy rose, stretching his back. "You'll do fine here, Era. Don't go looking for the ledger. It already listening through you." Tipped his hat, turned, and walked into the mist. She tried to fold, but the world folded like a dream, and all she found was rain hitting the ground in slow rhythm. The hum pulsed once more, louder than before, then settled deep into the bones of the planet. The storm ended at dawn. When the sun broke through, Era could hear it, soft and sure, the hum now woven into sunlight. She built a circle of stones on that ridge, not to mark the moment, but to give the rain a place to rest.
Others came and sat with her. They didn't speak, they didn't listen. Over generations, her circle became a sanctuary where time itself seemed to slow down. Travelers from far lands came to feel the stillness, to remember that peace wasn't found in arrival, but in allowance.
And every now and then, when storms rolled over that valley, someone would swear they saw him again, the cowboy leaning against a tree, humming soft, watching the rain with a half grin, but no one it approached. They didn't need to, they already knew the ledger had found another page, and the rain, eternal and merciful, kept falling over all of it, across ages, across hearts, across the long quiet that connects all things. Every droplet still whispered the same promise. True is the first time it was spoken. Take care of time, and time will take care of you. And the hum, softer than a heartbeat, yet strong enough to carry galaxies, rolled on. Era grew older in that valley, but the years didn't sit heavy on her bones. The rain saw to that. It moved through her veins, same way stories move through memory, never leaving that changing shape when the world asked it to. Each morning she woke before dawn, walked the ridge, and listened. Sometimes the hum was loud, stretching across the sky like thunder learning to sing again. Other times it was faint, hiding in the pause between raindrops. But it was always there. She didn't chase it anymore.
She just kept company. The circle of stones she'd built grew over time. Travelers would come from far lands, leaving small offerings, carved wood, a silk coin, a scrap of cloth damp from their own storms. They'd sit in the rain, heads bowed, and hum with her. No one asked for wealth or miracles. They came for stillness, and the rain gave it to them. Some stayed a day, have a lifetime. When they left, they didn't take souvenirs, just the memory of what it sounded like to breathe without rush. Those who stayed became caretakers of the circle, tending to the stones, cleaning the moss, teaching new arrivals to listen right. None called themselves leaders. The rain didn't lick titles. One day the sky opened wide and poured harder than it had in generations. Thunder rolled not in anger but in conversation, that the clouds themselves were speaking to the ground. The air shimmered with light that was not lightning. Era stood in the center of her circle, arms wide, eyes closed, her gray hair plastered to her skin. She could feel something different riding on the wind, an ache that was not pain but remembrance. The hum was changing again, deeper, older.
She knelt, pressing her palms to the wet earth. "All right," she whispered, "I'm listening." The answer came not from the sky, but from below. The ground pulsed with a rhythm she hadn't felt before, like the heartbeat of the world was shifting its tune. She gasped, tears mixing with rain, as visions rippled through her, flashes of Jeb and Eli sitting by the old porch, of walking through silver storms, of Saren humming under golden clouds. She saw the cowboy, too, standing alone at the edge of the universe, watching it unfold, his hand hovering over a chair that rocked on its own, his eyes turned toward her through the veil of rain. "It's your turn, darling," he said, voice the thunder smiling. Ira bowed her head. "What do I do?" "That same thing we done," he said softly. "Wait right." The light around her swelled till it filled every corner of the circle. Those who watched from the ridge swore the storm lifted straight into the heavens, like the clouds themselves were taking her home. When it cleared, the circle of stones still stood, humming faint with golden light, but Era was gone. Some say she became the rain itself, her voice now part of the downpour that blesses patient hearts. Others say she joined the cowboy beyond the edge of time, helping him write the next silence between storms. Either way, the valley kept breathing and the ledger kept turning. 1,000 years passed, though no one there bothered counting. The circle became legend, the valley sacred ground. Pilgrims came from skies unknown, each drawn by the same whisper that had once had Kale, Saren, and Era. They didn't come to find gods, they came to remember. The hum that rose from the circle was different now, fuller, richer, layered with the voices of everyone who listened. It was no longer just a rhythm, it was a choir. Each raindrop carried harmony, every storm a hymn to patience. In time, even the stars began to move in rhythm with that song. They flickered to its beat, breathing like living lanterns hung across the night. The hum reached farther than it had, past galaxies, past creation itself. It was no longer bound by light or matter. It had become the language of time. And in that language, there was no word for end. The Lazio out to humbly again somewhere far beyond where even the rain did fall. The cowboy sat on that porch that wasn't really a porch anymore, more an idea of one, carved from memory and mercy. He rocked slow, pipe glowing faint, eyes watching the shimmer of the infinite horizon. The chair beside him creaked, empty but expectant. He turned to it and smiled. Told you they'd learn it right, he said, voice gentle. That a summer storm. The hum answered back, rolling soft through the void. You still keeping watch always, he said. Ain't no reason not to. Folks still learning the sound of patience. Rain got work to do, the voice chuckled. 1,000 echoes folded into one. And when they've all learned, the cowboy leaned back, looking up at the eternal rain that shimmered like silver dust. Then we'll sit a while, listen to how quiet forever can be when it earned. He took one last puff of his pipe, exhaling a trail of smoke that rose and spread, becoming stars. He watched them glow, then whispered to the endless sky, "Go on now, keep humming." The porch creaked, the rain fell.
The universe breathed in time, and the hum-soft, endless kind rolled on. It carried through the ages, across every storm, every silence, every small moment where a soul chose peace over panic, mercy over hurry, kindness over pride. Each choice became a note, each pause a prayer, each act of stillness a page in the ledger. It wasn't a book anymore. It was a heartbeat, a promise, a song. And if you stand quiet enough beneath a gentle rain, you can still hear it, low, steady, eternal. Take care of time, and time will take care of you. The cowboy hum answers from somewhere beyond the clouds, smiling through thunder, keeping rhythm with the rain. And the ledger, faithful, patient, endless, turns once more. Somewhere, long after even the stars forgot their own names, the rain kept its steady song. It wasn't water anymore, not really. It had become something finer, more like thought, more like memory moving through the dark. Each droplet carried every story that done been lived, and every silence that done been honored. The hum had stretched so far by then that it could be felt in the space between atoms, in the pause for breath, in the hush after laughter. The ledger had outgrown words. It was pure rhythm, now existence remembering how to love itself slow. In a corner of that infinite calm, a small light flickered. It wasn't a star, it was smaller, humbler. It was a hearth, the kind that belonged to a home, though no house stood around it. The flame burned golden, crackling with rain on wood, and beside it sat a shape wrapped in shadow and warmth. Boots rested near the glow, and the air smelled faintly of pipe smoke and cedar. The cowboy was there again, or maybe he'd never left. His hat sat on his knee, his eyes reflecting the flicker like they'd been waiting on, this quiet all along. Across from him, the second chair no longer rocked empty. Someone sat there now, cloaked in the faint shimmer of storm light. Could have been Era, could have been Cale, could have been every soul that listened right. Their face wasn't one, but many, all patient, all familiar. The cowboy smiled, leaning back with a sigh that rolled through the whole of eternity. "Well," he said, "reckon we made it." The other smiled too. "Feels like we've been near before," he chuckled. "We have. We just took the long road getting back." They sat together in the hush, watching the rain shimmer beyond the porch. The storm didn't fall down anymore. It rose, drifting skyward in slow ribbons of light. Each droplet carried a sound, a laugh, a heartbeat, a song from an unforgotten world. Together it made a harmony too wide for any rigid voice to hold. The cowboy took off his hat, resting it on the railing. "Funny thing about time," he said. "You give it patience, it starts giving back." The other nodded. "So this is it, the end?" He shook his head. "No end to rain, friend. Just skies to fall through." They watched, dazed. The storm drifted farther out, stretching across the horizon till it disappeared. Silence settled in. Not the cold kind, but the kind that hums with rest. For a long while, neither spoke. Then the other leaned forward, eyes reflecting the golden firelight. "You think they'll remember?" The cowboy smiled, slow and sure. "They already do. Every time someone waits when it be easy to rush, every time they listen instead of talk, every time they let the rain touch them instead of hiding from it, that remembering. Ledger don't need names. It needs hearts that know how to pause." The other looked down at the floorboards, watching the tiny puddles form and vanish in the rain misted through. "You get tired?" He laughed. "Soft thunder rolling across distant plains. Sure I do. But resting don't mean stopping. Just means I get to sit a spell and watch the work do itself. Lean back in the chair, creaking slow. And nothing sweeter than seeing patience bloom without you pushing it. The fire cracked, sending sparks floating into the endless dark. Each spark became a droplet, each droplet a new world.
The cowboy watched him go, nodding in approval. There they go, he murmured. New rain, same song. The other tilted their head. You gonna fall? He grinned, that same weather-wearer grin that once calmed storms. Reckon I'll let 'em hum on their own for a while. Universe knows the tune now. Don't need me leading every verse. He tapped his pipe against the rail, and a low rhythm echoed through the void. Steady, certain, infinite. Still, he said, I'll keep the porch light burning. Always room for a wanderer who, learning to wait. The rain shimmer dimmed into the distance, and the hum softened until it was barely more than breath. Stars flickered in rhythm. Whole galaxies swayed to the slow music of time, finally at ease. The ledger had become so vast that even the thought of it was comfort enough to keep the dark from feeling empty. It didn't need ink or paper anymore. Every soul who'd have paused had written a verse in it, whether they knew it or not. The cowboy watched it, then said, You know, I used to think wealth was what you hold. He smiled. Turns out it's what you let go of, what you make space for, what you trust will come back when it's ready. The other nodded, eyes glinting with quiet pride. Reckon that what the rain knew all along. They fell silent again. The fire burned low, the hum thinned until it was just a heartbeat stretched across eternity. Then the cowboy spoke one last time, voice a whisper that shook the stars. Take care of time, he said, and time will take care of you. The fire answered with a soft crackle, the rain with a sigh. The porch faded into light, the chairs dissolving licked dust into dawn. All that remained was the hum, eternal, merciful, patient. It carried through the quiet, touching every drop, every life, every pause yet to come. Somewhere in the endless rhythm of forever, the rain began there, gentle, familiar, true. The new rain didn't rush to fall. It drifted, easy thought, taking its time to find the places that still needed it. Each drop carried a whisper of the old worlds, the hum of porch boards swelling in storm air, the laugh of Kale echoing under thunder, the quiet resolve of air as she listened through her final dawn. But more than memory, it carried intention. The rain knew where to go now. It didn't need to learn anymore. It had become the teacher. Down below, a new land stretched out at an open hand. Wide plains shimmered under skies that glowed faint gold, the air thick with promise. There were no rivers yet, no mountains, no people, just soil soft the breath, waiting to be shaped. When the first drops touched out, they sank deep. Human they went. The hum wasn't nut sound now, it was instruction. Grow slow, it said, stay kind, remember what came before. And the world listened. The ground quivered, pulling itself upward in patient rhythm. Hills rose like sighs, valleys folded into rest. Oceans there without roar or rush. Even light learned a lesson. It didn't blaze or pierce, just spread gentle, turning the whole horizon into the color of forgiveness. The hum rolled on through it, a soft left a lullaby long in eternity. From that patient soil came life again, not born in chaos or accident, but in deliberate grace. The first beings emerged not from need, but from curiosity. They were small and luminous, shaped from vapor and sound. Their bodies shimmered at candlelight seen through rain. When they moved, it was to the rhythm of the hum when they spoke. Their voices carried the calm of deep water. They didn't build cities, they built moments, little sanctuaries of stillness, clearings where wind could rest, stones could listen, and the rain could speak freely. They called themselves the Remembered, not because they had names in the past, but as they knew their very being was memory made new. The ledger pulsed through them. They didn't pray to it or worship it. They were it, the continuation of everything that had the weight of light. Their lives were spent keeping the rhythm balanced, passing on patience in the only way that mattered, by living it. Each year, or whatever passed for a year in that timeless place, they'd gather in what they know the hollow of echoes, a vast valley carved out by the first rain. They'd sit in silence, their forms flickering like firelight on still water, until the first drop of the new season rain fell. Then, one by one, they'd begin to hum. Not songs of worship or fear, but songs of gratitude for time, for stillness, for the privilege of existence slow. And when the hum reached its height, the sky itself would shimmer. And from the heart of that rain, the cowboy voice would roll once more across the horizon. Steady now, he'd say, his drawl stretching wide, they'd the dawn. Don't rush the quiet. That where the truth lives, they never saw him, not truly. He was part of the hum now, his spirit woven into every pause between thunderclaps.
but they felt him. Same ain't gravity, same ain't breath. And they answered, all to death, in voices soft things falling mist. Will wait right, that world grew different from any that came before. There was no war, no greed, no hunger to outshine or outlast. Its people measured wealth in stillness, in how long they could listen before speaking, how deep they could breathe before acting. They taught their young to plant songs instead of seeds, to grow quiet instead of crops. And when storms came, they didn't seek shelter. They walked out into the open, arms spread, faces turned to the rain, letting it write new verses of the ledger across their skin. Rain passed like chapters written in water. Time didn't move there, it settled. The remembered built nothing permanent, yet their world thrived eternal. Each rainfall carried the essence of those who'd come before, fallen not lost but their reminder. They knew death not their departure but their dispersed sought, the return of the hum to the whole. Every end was another verse finding its place in the song, and once every great span of calm, when the skies had been quiet long enough for even the wind to grow curious, a voice would ripple through the rain again. Not the cowboy this time, but one that carried her cadence, softer, higher, ageless. It was Ira, now one with the storm. Listen deep, she'd whisper. Her words gleed through the downpour like moonlight over still water. The rain remembers you. Those words would fill the hollow of echoes until the air itself glowed. The remembered would lift their heads, close their eyes, and feel every heartbeat that had to love the rain. They didn't need to speak. They just waited. And in that waiting, the ledger turned again quietly, cleanly, perfectly. Far above, on a porch that wasn't bound by time or space, the cowboy sat back in his chair, boots crossed at the ankle, a slow grin curling under the brim of his hat. The pipe in his hand glowed faint, and for a moment he looked like he'd been carved out of the storm itself. Look at him, he murmured, watching the new world breathe. Learned it better than we did. Leaned forward, elbows on his knees, eyes glowing with that same quiet pride that had outlived the storms. Ledger humming fine, he said, more to himself than to the rain, and nothing left to fix. Just stories left to tell. He struck a match, the sound crackling like thunder in miniature, and drew slow on his pipe. The smoke rose, twisting into the shape of rain before disappearing into the horizon. He chuckled low and soft. Reckon they don't need my preaching anymore. The porch creaked as he leaned back again, rain falling around him in perfect rhythm. Somewhere in the distance, the hum swelled, not louder but deeper, like the universe itself was drawing a long, patient breath. The cowboy nodded. Go on then, he whispered. Keep waiting right. And so the rain did. It fell forever and always changing shapes, changing worlds, but never changing heart. Each drop another verse, each hum another reminder, each pause another page in the story without end. The ledger had become life itself. The cowboy porch had become the horizon. And the rain was love, written slow enough for forever to understand. The rain didn't fade after that. It deepened, like a thought that refuses to leave even when the words for it are gone. The new world swelled beneath its patience, stretching wider, growing wiser, never in a hurry to finish. Mountains rose in slow conversation with the clouds, their peaks gathering storms the way old men gather memories. Rivers wandered instead of rushing, twisting through valleys, as if enjoying the feel of being useful without needing to prove it. Even the light learned humility. It didn't blaze or boast, just shone enough for things to see what they already were. And in that quiet bloom of existence, there came another generation of the remembered, taller now, surer but still soft-spoken. They lived by the rhythm that had been carried through every rain before them, humming while they worked, singing while they waited. The rain had become their teacher, their clock, their scripture. To them the storm wasn't a thing that passed, it was a thing that remained. They said the thunder was the sound of time excellent, and lightning was just the sky remembering itself. One among them, a wanderer named Solon, began to dream of the cowboy long before he knew his name. He saw flashes, boots glistening with starlight, a match flaring in the dark, laughter rolling like faraway thunder. When he'd wake, the dream stayed in his chest, humming faint like a song stuck between heartbeats. He didn't talk about him much, the others already knew. Every few generations, someone dreamed of the one who first taught the rain how to listen. They called such souls echo bearers, and their duty was simple: walk, wait, and hum when the world forgot how. So Solon walked. He followed the rivers through their quiet bends, sat by lakes that mirrored the storm patience, and slept beneath skies that whispered lullabies older than language.
Wherever he went, the hum went with him. Villages would grow calmer after he passed. Fields would ripen fuller. Some said he healed the ground, but Solon knew better. He just reminded it to breathe. And in the deepest part of him, the rain rhythm tapped steady, like an old friend keeping time. One dusk, while traveling through the hollow of echoes, he felt a strange pull, not forward, not back, but inward. The air trembled with the sound of rain about to change its tune. He knelt, pressing his palms to the wet stone, and closed his eyes. The hum rose through him, and in its folds came a voice, slow, rough-edged, warm embers. "Well, I'll be," it said. "Still humming, huh?" Solon froze, breath caught in his throat. Who there?" The laughter that followed wasn't loud, it was weathery, like boots crunching on gravel after years of ved. "And about who, son?" "More about hay." He opened his eyes. The valley shimmered with rainlight, and there he was, the cowboy sitting on an old wooden fence that hadn't been there a moment before. He looked just as Solon had dreamt, calm, endless, realer than reality. His hat tipped low, pipe blowing soft, grin tucked under the kind of patience that only comes from eternity. "You been listening good?" the cowboy said. Nodding slow, Ledger been humming fine through you. Solon couldn't find words. Wanted to bow, to ask, to thank, but all he managed was, "I've been waiting, course, you have," the cowboy said. "That's the whole point." The rain round him paused, not stopping, lingering mid-air, every drop hanging light, pearls on invisible streams. The hum quieted till it was barely a breath. The cowboy leaned forward. "Tell me, son, what the world sound at now." Solon swallowed. "It's peaceful, but sometimes too peaceful. Folks don't talk guts no more. They listen, but maybe they forgot why." The cowboy nodded, eyes soft but sharp. "Happen every few editing. Patience can turn into stillness if you ain't careful. World don't need to rush, but it does need to move. Rain gotta fall to mean something, so what do we do?" He smiled. "You hum louder." Solon blinked. "That simple? Always was," the cowboy said. "Truth don't get fancy, 'cause the universe does." He took a draw from his pipe, the ember glowing bright. "World needs a reminder that waiting ain't the same as stopping. So go on, walk, sing, stir the air a bit, let the rain remember it, can dance." Solon felt the hum rise in his chest again, stronger than before. The drops out and began to move, spinning slow, then faster, forming in small whirlwinds of light. "I'll try," he said. The cowboy chuckled. "Don't try, son." Ledger writes, "Best in motion, then sudden he came. The cowboy was gone, only the rain remaining falling in perfect rhythm once more." Solon stood alone in the valley, the edge of the voice lingering in the air like thunder aftertaste. He raised his head and began to hum, not softly this time, but full and free. The sound rolled out across the land, gathering weight and warmth until the whole sky sang back. The rain shifted, turning silver and gold, spiraling down in patterns too graceful for chance. The valleys answered, the rivers swelled, the mountains trembled, the world began to move again. From the porch beyond creation, the cowboy watched, leaning on his cane, a proud half-smile under the brim of his hat. "That it," he said to the hum itself, rain learning how to dance again. The hum rolled in response, tender and vast. The ledger shimmered brighter, stretching wider, the universe expanding in rhythm. Everywhere, in every world born of stillness, rain began to fall with new joy, not to erase, but to renew. It was laughter in liquid form, mercy turned melody, and somewhere within that endless downpour, every name, every soul that had listened, hummed along. The cowboy tipped his hat toward the horizon and whispered, "Well done, boy." Then, smiling, he closed his eyes and let the rain take him again, into the hum, into the story, into forever. The rain that followed was unlike any before it. It didn't simply fall. It flowed with purpose, moving through every thread of existence like a melody relearning its own tune. The hum had found a new tempo, still slow, still patient, but now carrying a pulse, a heartbeat of quiet joy. The air shimmered with it. Worlds old and new turned their faces upward, and the rain swept across creation, leaving behind more than water. It left reminders of motion, of gratitude, of the beauty in simply taking one more step. Solon's song had carried far beyond mountains and seas, through clouds of golden dust, all the way to the edges of the universe where the hum met silence. Every world of tits woke a little brighter. The remembered began moving in, not rushing but living. They danced in the rain, their feet tapping out rhythms that matched the slow roll of thunder above. Their laughter rose, and for the first time in eons, the storm laughed with them. The sky and the soil, once separated by habit, became partners in. In time, Solon's journey led him to a place even the rain hesitated to touch. It was a hollow, black that midnight and quiet Abe thought. Here the hum didn't add, it waited. In stepped in careful, each footfall stirring tiny ripples in the dark ground. Why, it's so quiet, he whispered. The air didn't answer. He could feel the hum underneath everything, coiled and patient, like it was holding its breath. He knelt, pressing his palm to the cold earth, and the rain above stopped. The silence thickened. For the first time, Solon felt the absence of rhythm, the pause before the next note. It wasn't emptiness, it was potential, the part of the song that meaning collects itself. He realized all at once that even patience needs rest. The world had been humming for so long that it forgot what silence could teach. Ledger listening came a voice behind him. He turned. There she was, Ira, the listener of the valley, her form woven from mist and moonlight. Her eyes glowed faint, ta'en dawn through fog. Been a long time since anyone came this far down, she said, stepping closer, her boots barely touching the earth. Solon bowed his head. I heard the hum slowing. Thought maybe it needed help, she smiled, a soft thing full of understanding. Not help, just space. Every story needs a breath. He lit around the hollow, feels like the rain forgot how to fall leg, because it learning something too, she said. They're a kind of rain that don't fall from the sky. It rises, comes from within the soil, from the memory of all things waiting to begin and again. As she spoke, the ground shimmered, light seep upward like sap climbing through roots. It moved slow, patient, until droplets of gold began lifting from the earth, drifting toward the clouds above. They weren't heavy like normal rain. They floated like lanterns. Each one hummed softly, singing a note of remembrance. Solon felt it deep in his chest. That same warmth he'd felt the first time he'd met the cowboy in the storm. Ira turned to him, her voice blending with the sound. You brought the dance back. Now the rain answering, Solon's eyes glistened. That beautiful, beautiful was it earned, she said. You reminded the rain that patience don't mean stillness. You gave it motion again. Now I've given that motion back. The droplets rose higher, gathering into swirling halos that wrapped the hollow in light. The hum grew stronger, carrying voices within it. The cowboy laughed, Cale's steady hum, sarin melody, the ache of every soul that had chosen to wait right. It wasn't a chorus anymore. It was communion, the song of all things knowing they belonged to one another. When the light reached its peak, the air shifted. A figure began to form in the glow, tall, familiar, timeless. The cowboy stood there, leaning on his cane, a half smile under his hat. Well, now, he said, voice rolling like the first crack of thunder after a long drought. Didn't I tell you the rain learns quick? Solon laughed through the tears streaking his face. You did. The old man nodded. And look at it now, running both ways, yet to keep time honest. He tipped his hat to Ira. You held the silence long enough for the world to catch its breath. You, he said, nodding at Solon, taught it how to sing while it did. Ira form shimmered our heat over still water. The rain remembers us all. The cowboy grinned. At the time, we don't leave marks, we leave echoes. The three of them stood together a long while, watching the upward rain until the last droplet vanished into the clouds. The sky glowed for a heartbeat, then dimmed to the soft gay of calm after storm. The hum settled again, steady air. Now what? Solon aimed quietly. The cowboy looked out toward the horizon. Now, we rest a spell. World don't need our hands no more. It got its own rhythm. It should read itself just fine. He turned, starshine glinting in his eyes. But if you feel it slowing, you know what to do. Don't shout, don't fix, just hum. Frey'll find a rest. Ira nodded. Her shape already melting back into mist, the silence will hold it to then. Solon bowed low. Thank you, both of you, the cowboy chuckled. Don't thank me, son. Thank the waiting that made you listen. The light faded. When Solon lit up the end, the hollow was empty. Only the hum remained, gentle as a promise. He closed his eyes, whispering into the quiet, take care of time, and time will take care of you, or somewhere far above. Thunder rolled once more, soft, amused, eternal.
The rain began again, this time both falling and rising, a perfect rhythm, a complete circle. The ledger had turned another page, though no pages were left to turn. Only rain, only hum, only forever listening to itself breathe. The hum carried on, stretching through the folds of creation like a gentle hand brushing over the fabric of eternity.
It threaded itself through every spark of life, every whisper of motion, every breath that had to dare to pause and listen. The rain above the hollow kept rising and falling, a two-way song now like heaven and earth had finally remembered they were never meant to be apart. It was a balance so complete that even silence bowed to it. Solon stayed there for what might have been a night, or 1,000 years' time had lost its edges. He listened dead, the hum shifted and wove through him. He could feel his heartbeat sink into it, slow and certain. Every moment he was less himself and more of the song. When he finally rose to his feet, the rain greeted him like an old friend. He stepped out of the hollow, leaving behind footprints that shimmered like lanterns before vanishing into the wet earth. The world had changed again while he'd been inside. The remembered had built no monuments, but the land itself carried their marks. Rivers curved where they had danced. Trees leaned in the rhythm of their laughter. The air held their patience the way a good story holds its truth, even after the teller gone. So he walked among them, humming soft, and wherever he went, the ground brightened a little. Ed nodding in agreement. He came upon a small village one dusk, settled in a valley that smelled of cedar and mist. The folk there lived simple huts woven from reeds, fires that burned slow and steady, children playing barefoot in puddles that mirrored the clouds. They didn't speak his tongue, but when he hummed, they hummed back. That was all the understanding either of them needed. He stayed with them a while, teaching them how to listen to the rain instead of talk over it. It don't answer words, he told them. Answers feeling. You gotta let it find you. One of the children, a girl with eyes like dark glass, asked him once, "What happens if it stops?" He smiled, crouching beside her. "Rain don't stop, darling. Sometimes it did changes shape. When you don't see it falling, that means it learning something new." She thought on that a long while, then said, "So it like people exactly," he said, tapping her nose like people who ain't done growing yet. When he left, the whole village stood in the rain, humming rhythmically. He looked back once, saw their faces shining with the quiet joy of understanding, and tipped his head to the sky. Ledger reading itself to find, he murmured. He wandered far after that. The world grew wide, wound him plains that glittered like silver cloth, forests that breathed light instead of air, mountains that sang in deep tones whenever thunder rolled. Everywhere he went, he heard the hum, sometimes loud, sometimes barely a whisper, but always there. It followed him even in sleep, humming under his dreams, like a heartbeat that never tired. He came to realize he wasn't wandering alone anymore. The rain walked with him, a shadow that shone. When he'd sit by a stream to rest, it'd pool around him without wetting his clothes, as if listening. "You remembering for me now?" he'd ask. The water would shimmer in reply, making ripples that sounded suspiciously like laughter. In time, the stories of the rainwalker spread. Some said he was born of the storm itself. Others said he was the cowboy's son, or maybe the cowboy reborn. Truth didn't matter much. What mattered was the feeling his hum left behind. Farmers claimed their crops grew stronger after hearing it. The sailor said the sea calmed when his tune reached the waves. Even the winds changed direction sometimes, but to carry his sound a bit farther, and through it Solon never claimed nothing ain't mine to own. He'd tell anyone who tried to name him. I'm done humming what was already here, years folded like pages, soft and worn, till one day the rain itself began to dim, not disappear, just quiet. The hum softened into near silence. Solon felt it deep in his chest, that shift between verses when a song about to turn. He followed it to the highest ridge in the world, a place where clouds brushed the earth like tired travelers settling in for rest. There he sat, legs crossed, hat in his lap, listening. He knew what was coming. The cycle was turning again. The horizon shimmered. From its heart rose figures made of rainlight, Era first, then Kale, then the countless faces of the remembered. They weren't ghosts or gods, they were continuity. The hum grew faintly around them, steady but low, like breath before a word. Solon smiled, tears mixing with drizzle. "It's starting over, ain't it?" Ayla nodded, her voice barely more than breeze. The song got another verse to write. He stood, stretching his arms to the sky. "Guess I'll stay and listen." From the distance came a low chuckle. The cowboy, warm May sunset after rain. That the spirit, son Ledger ain't done singing yet. The clouds opened once more, but this time the rain didn't fall down or up. It fell through space, through time, through memory. Each drop a note, each note a heartbeat, each heartbeat another reminder that creation don't end. It just learns the next rhythm. Solon closed his eyes, humming with it. The ridge glowed gold. When the light faded, there was no body left, only a shimmer humming in tune with the rain. A new cycle had begun. Somewhere, another listener would wake with a hum in their chest. Another hand would reach for the storm, and the ledger would turn its invisible page once again. From his porch beyond it, the cowboy watched. Same grin under the brim of his hat. Same slow nod, reckon they'll never run out of rain, he said. Good thing, too. There's still a whole lot of forever left to hum through. He leaned back, pipe blowing soft, and somewhere thunder rolled like laughter stretching across the edges of time. The rain answered. The song continued. The ledger waited, always turning, always patient, always true. The hum steady, endless, kind rolled on. Long after Solon's shimmer had faded into the mist, the hum settled back into the marrow of the world. It was quieter now, the way that old song gets softer when the fire burns low. But it never stopped. It simply rested, waiting for the next listener. Ages passed like slow rivers through forgotten valleys. The rain went on falling steady at ebb, changing its shape but never its heart. It became snow in some places, mist in others, dew on mornings that felt too young to remember anything. Yet every drop still carried that same quiet promise. Wait right, and the world will answer. There came a time when the stars above that world grew dim, not dead, just weary. They burned too long without pause, their light stretching thin across the cold. The sky itself looked tired, like an old story that had been told too often. The down-bound Wigwitchers moved slower, their song softer. The remembered had long since turned to legend, a hum forgotten by name but not by instinct. Every child who sat quiet in the rain, every farmer who waited out a drought without losing hope, every lover who paused before speaking, they'll carry traces of the ledger without knowing it. The rhythm lived on, scattered but alive. Then one dusk, the horizon bruised purple and gold. A single raindrop fell that didn't behave like the rest. It landed on a stretch of barren land where even moss had given up. When it hit the soil, it didn't soak in. It sank down like it was searching for something deep. Far beneath, where the hum still lingered faint and warm, the drop touched it and the world shivered awake. A tremor rolled through the mountains. Rivers stirred in their sleep. The stars brightened in a little, that if remembering their duty. The hum rose, slow and deliberate, stretching through the earth like an old man flexing his fingers after a long rest. That tremor found its way to a small settlement tucked at the edge of a worn desert. The folks there had forgotten what rain felt like. Their wells were deep, but their hope was shallow. Life had turned practical, stripped of poetry. They worked, they ate, they slept, nothing more. But that night, a sound drifted through the stillness that made even the oldest among them lift their heads. It wasn't thunder. It was lower, rounder, carrying warmth instead of warning. The hum had returned. In one of those homes, a young woman named Marin woke from a dream of silver rivers. She could still hear the song from it, pulsing in her chest like a second heartbeat. She stepped outside, bare feet touching the cracked earth, and for the first time in her life, felt rain. It was faint, just a few drops, but it was real. She laughed, the sound fragile as glass, then turned her face up to the sky. The hum deepened around her. "You hearing this?" she whispered. There was no one nearby, but the rain answered anyway. One soft drop landing on her lips like a reply. By dawn, the whole settlement had dead outside. No one spoke. They just stood there, listening to the rain hum like a memory waking up. Marin felt it stronger than anyone. When she closed her eyes, she saw flashes, faces she didn't know, storms she'd never seen, a cowboy sitting on a porch that existed nowhere and everywhere. His voice drifted through her mind, calm and sure. "I'll fix it, darling," he said. "Just feel it." From that day on, the rain stayed. Not constant, not flooding, just enough. Enough to grow things again, enough to wash the dust off forgotten hearts. Marin started teaching the children how to hum with it. At first they giggled, mocking her tone. But when the clouds rumbled back in answer, their laughter turned to wonder. She smiled and said, "That's the world talking back. Keep listening." Over the years, the village changed, not through inventions or discoveries, but through rhythm. People worked with patience. They built without rush. When disputes rose, they waited out the anger till the rain came. It always did. The place became known in Haven Rest, not because it was rich or mighty, but because no stormer broke it. The hum had rooted itself deep beneath their feet, teaching them that wealth was just time spent right. One evening, decades later, Marin sat by her door, watching her grandchildren play in the drizzle. She hummed, soft and steady, the same tone she'd heard that first night. The hum drifted up into the sky, and thunder answered low and kind. She smiled. "Still listening, ain't you?" she murmured. Somewhere in the clouds, a deep laugh rolled back. "Always," it seemed to say. She closed her eyes, letting the rhythm wash through her. Halbert, just once she saw him in. Cowboy sitting in that porch light that glowed from nowhere, his hat tipped low, his smile easy ate sunrise. He nodded toward her, pipe smoke curling into the shape of rain. "You did fine, darling," he said. "Ledger still turning?" Vision faded with the last drop of rain. Marin leaned back, peace settling in her bones. The hum filled the air around her, mingling with the sound of children laughter and wind moving through wet grass. "Wait right," she whispered, "and the world will answer." And it did, over and over for generations yet to come. The rain fell, the hum carried on, and every soul who paused long enough to listen found wealth beyond measure, not of gold, but of grace. The ledger had no end, but the story had no need for one. It was still being written, drop by drop, hum by hum, in the soft language of time itself. Far above, the cowboy leaned back in his chair, eyes on the horizon that kept on stretching. "Reckon that a good day worked," he said with a grin. "But tomorrow got its own rain waiting." He tapped his pipe, and the sound echoed like thunder laughing at the edge of eternity. "Let it come slow," he whispered. "The best things always do." The rain agreed. It fell again. The world's patient air listened. The years that followed turned like a wagon wheel in slow, perfect circles. Haven Rest became more than a settlement. It became a rhythm stitched into the land itself. Generations were born beneath skies that hummed low with kindness, their lives measured not by coin or conquest, but by how gentle they could be with time. The people no longer spoke of luck or fortune. They spoke of seasons. Every good thing cuds in its own rain, they'd say. And when droughts came, as they sometimes did, they didn't curse the sky. They waited, keeping faith in the hum that had never failed him. Yet old songs turned into word chants, lullabies and prayers. When a child was born, they washed the newborn in rainwater, collect from the first storm of the year. Humming they did. But someone passed on. They sang low until thunder answered, "Send in the soul home." The people didn't build statues or temples. The rain itself was their church. It had no walls, no roof, no priest, only the sound of patience returning to itself. In that faith, the world stayed whole. Marin grandchildren grew tall and steady. One in a boy named Wren had the same kind of quiet eyes he once did. He could hear things others couldn't, winds that spoke in riddles, rivers that sighed in sleep. When storms came, he'd wander into the fields barefoot, humming till lightning curved harmlessly around him. Some folks said the rain loved him too much to strike. He didn't argue. He'd smile as it ain't about love or fear. Rain just knows who listens. One night, while the rest of the village slept, Wren woke to silence. Not the peaceful kind, the kind that hums on the edge of something changing. He stepped outside, and for the first time since he was born, no rain fell. The sky was clear, too clear, like it had forgotten its lines. He tilted his head, trying to hear the hum, but it was faint, then thread stretched too far. Panic didn't take him, but unease did. The ledger had gone quiet. He walked out into the fields, past the sleeping crops, past the old stone well that whispered in the wind. When he reached the edge of the valley, he found what looked like a shimmer hanging in the air. Not fog, not light, something between. He reached out, and the moment his fingers touched it, a sound broke the silence. His voice, low and rough and kind, that came quick, and said, "Didn't even let the world miss you first." Wren froze, his breath catching. "Who there named and said plenty?" The voice chuckled, but folks mostly just called me what they needed to be. The shimmer thickened. Out of it stepped the cowboy, same worn hat, same slow grin, boots that looked like they'd walked across creation itself. He leaned against the air like it was a porch rail and nodded toward the boy. Heard the hum slowing, figured someone would come check. Wren swallowed. "You're real enough to get my boots wet," the cowboy said, looking around. Quiet out 10. Too quiet. Wren thinking too hard again. Wren furrowed his brow. "What do you mean?" "Every now and then," the cowboy said, "the world forgets it don't need to try to exist. Starts thinking it gotta earn its keep again. That when the hum falters happen, hearts too." He crouched, drawing a circle in the dusk. You can't make patience. You can remember it. Wren stared at the circle, so how do I fix it? The cowboy grinned, the corners of his eyes crinkling. You don't. You're reminded how to breathe. Wren nodded slow. Huh? Same way your grandma did, the cowboy said. Same way I did before her. You hum. You listen. And when the silence answers, you thank it before you speak. The boy closed his eyes, humming, still faintly, but he could feel it beneath his ribs, trying to find its voice again. He opened his mouth and let out a single note, low, steady, almost unsure. It trembled in the air, spreading through the shimmer. The cowboy joined in, his voice deep-breathed thunder, humming in perfect harmony. The two tones braided together, rising into the sky like smoke from a campfire that never died. Slowly, the clouds began to gather again. Wren's hum grew stronger. The shimmer brightened, and then rain, gentle, sure, endless, it fell around him in silver sheets, each drop humming its own verse. The ledger turned another invisible page. The cowboy clapped a hand on Wren's shoulder. There you go. Wren is with it then. Wren looked up at him, eyes wide, let it stop. The cowboy smiled, that same easy grin that could calm storms. It don't stop, son. It passes the rhythm on. Before Wren could answer, the shimmer swallowed the old man whole, leaving behind nothing but the sound of boots walking off into thunder. The rain poured harder, laughing it fell. Wren stood there to dawn, humming along. And when the first light broke through the clouds, he whispered, "Thank you." By the time he returned to the village, the fields were drinking deep and deep. The people stirring in their homes, smiling in their sleep, dreaming the say dream. The hum had come back stronger than in, weaving through every heartbeat and haven rest. The world had remembered how to breathe, and somewhere far beyond the edges of all things, the cowboy sat back in his creaking chair, pipe-glowing eyes glinting with satisfaction. Another storm fixed itself, he said with a chuckle. Good boy. He leaned his head back, listening to the sound of the rain he'd loved since time was young. Ledger still turning, guess I'll keep watching a while longer. The rain answered with a whisper that stretched across eternity. And so the hum rolled on patient, endless, alive. The rain that morning didn't feed the fields. It carried stories. Each drop seemed to murmur with voices older than any tongue still spoken. They told of the ones who had waited, the ones who had listened, the ones who had learned the gentle arithmetic of time. Children of heaven rest ran barefoot through the puddles, laughing at the strange way the water seemed to hum beneath their steps. None of them knew the name of the cowboy or of the old songs carried through thunder, but every one of them moved with his rhythm in their blood. The hum was legacy now, folded into their laughter, stitched into their calm. Wren grew older, his hair silvering with the years. He became the quiet figure folks turned to when the rain hesitated or when a harvest seemed uncertain. He never thought himself a leader, nor did anyone else call him one. They just said, "Wren humming. Everything gonna be all right," and it always was. He'd sit on the porch his grandmother once used to sing from, eyes closed, letting the storm write its verses around him. Sometimes he'd hear a low chuckle in the thunder, the kind that sounded at approval. "You're keeping time good, boy," it would say. Life stretched easy, not lazy, the way good soil stretches after rain. Folks began wandering in from far valleys, drawn by rumor of a place where patience bloomed into peace.
Oh, listen, I should know about seeing you on the go out as a thief with that. Jumped them little lands and thus the ledger spread, not by hand or bull, but by hate. Every new settlement that listened became another verse. Across the plains, through forests and deserts, hums began to rise in quiet corners of the world. The rain had become a teacher without name, and every student spoke his lesson in their own way. One day, near the twilight of his years, Wren stood on the ridge overlooking the valley. The air was heavy, not with storm, but with expectant. He could feel something changing in the rhythm, a new verse pressing at the edge of silence, waiting to be born. He closed his eyes and listened deep, deeper than before. Beneath the hum of the world, beneath the sigh of the wind, he heard another sound, a heartbeat, slow and immense. It was not his own, it was not the earth, it was everything. You hearing that too came a voice, warm of whiskey, lower horizon.
Wren smiled without opening his eyes. "Reckon I am." The cowboy appeared beside him, leaning on his cane, eyes shining with the gold of eternal sunsets. "Storm changing then," he said, the ledger turning toward something neat. Wren nodded. "I can feel it, like the rain getting ready to tell a story we ain't heard for." The cowboy grin stretched easy. That the trick, son, story don't repeat, but it rhymes, always has. They stood together in silence, watching clouds gather like slow dancing thoughts. After a long while, Wren said, "You'll get tired of starting it yet?" The cowboy chuckled. "Tired? Nah, turning just long enough to enjoy every version of the same good truth." "What truth is that?" He tapped the side of his hat, starshine flickering as his eyes should have been. That wealth ain't what you keep, it what keeps you. Patience, kindness, time. Those three are the only things that never run out if you treat them gentle. Wren thought on that. Guess that what the ledger really about, huh?
Hey, then articulate for you all better yarn and be one of those days, ladies glad and blue lights spilling from each one, that memory turned liquid. When they hit the ground, flowers bloomed instantly, tiny things, soft things, breath. The air smelled of thunder and forgiveness. Wren looked up, eyes wide. What kind of rain is this? The cowboy voice softened. That sun is the rain of remembering happened every age or so. It when the world stops to look back on what it learned before moving on. Wren reached out his hands, catching a few drops. They pulsed faintly against his palms, humming small songs. He could see flashes inside the mirror laughing under stormlight. Era standing in her circle of stones, Solon humming into the rising rain, and the cowboy himself sitting eternal by that unseen porch. Every drop was a story, every story a promise. The rain didn't just feed, it remembered. The cowboy tilted his head toward the valley. Go on, let it touch you proper. Hey, this report outfit now. Wren stepped forward, spreading his arms wide. The rain fell heavier. The hum swelled not that on him, but through him. He felt his pulse slow till it matched the rhythm of the storm. He wasn't separate anymore, he was within it. And in that moment he understood what every listener before him had known. That time wasn't a straight line or a circle. It was a heartbeat forever beating toward kindness.
When the rain cleared, the ridge was empty. Only the hum lingered, richer and deeper than before. Down below, having rest woke to a new calm, their fields heavy with bloom. They didn't know why the world suddenly felt warmer, quieter, more at ease, but they felt it. And without speaking, they began to hum. The ledger had turned again, its story carrying on through every mouth that remembered how to breathe between storms. Far off beyond sky and silence, the cowboy leaned back in his chair, boots crossed, hat low.
The articulate for you out of the immediate rewriting of the welcome. He was leading you, but engineered voting lab jump as a revision. Each mouth is bright, washing the ash, drift off into the endless dot. Each spark run into a raindrop before vanishing the hum rolled beneath him. Familiar deep breath, he smiled, eyes half closed, and murmured, keep on, old friend, you're doing fine. Full of rain obeys, steady, patient, eternal. The hum spread wider still, whispering across galaxies, touching worlds that hadn't yet known sound. The ledger grew without pages, without ink, just rhythm forever writing itself in the quiet between heartbeats. Might you listen close, real close, beneath even the smallest drop of rain, you could still hear that cowboy drawl, soft and content. Take care of time, and time will take care of you. Get up, blue rain, the world seemed to settle into a kind of timeless hush, neither sleeping nor fully awake. The storm still came, but they carried a sweetness to it. Now that music played slow on a porch guitar.
Hey, this says, now, Brian, years a month into the old days in the year that jets on lazy behind the softer rhythm than the last. Having rest thrived in that quiet rhythm with the people speaking less and listening more. They didn't farm for food anymore, they farmed for meaning. They said the soul had memory now, that it bloomed different when you worked it with a steady heart. Maybe it did. Crops grew richer when tended with calm hands, and rain always fell where its songs were sung in gratitude instead of need.
Children grew up learning how to hum before they could count. Their lullabies weren't words, but tones low, round, carrying the weight of patience. Some nights, the clouds above their homes would shimmer faintly, light flickering in rhythm to the little ones' songs. Their elders smiled at that and said, rain listening close tonight. No one feared thunder anymore. They faded the cowboy knock, a sign he was still keeping watch as the generations folded over each other. Stories of the hum began to blur into legend. Some said it was the heart of the earth. Others claimed it was the voice of creation itself, whispering to those who hadn't forgotten how to be still. But every so often, when the night went too quiet, an old-timer would lean close to the fire and say, "Nah, it older than that. It him." The cowboy, he's still humming so the world don't stop. Then they'd tip their heads towards the rain outside, and for a heartbeat everyone around the fire would swear they heard boots walking on the clouds. Far beyond that peaceful valley, past mountains and star fields and the silent borders of thought, the hum stretched on, finding new lands not yet born. Whole worlds woke to its rhythm, feeling rain before they had skies to catch it. Some of those worlds took to the hum easy, their rivers learning patience the way breath learns lungs. Others fought it, trying to twist the sound into noise, to rush what was meant to grow slow. But the hum didn't fight back, it just waited, as it always had, until even the loudest hearts wore themselves quiet. And in one such world, newborn, wild, bright with youth, the hum touched a single spark.
For leading out to nas, now bring me one another go. There was with you, friend have been running lab to was a meet soon. Must go, you put that. When it could be like that, put the
From that spark rose a figure unlike the rest, neither man nor woman, but something shaped by calm.
They were built of wind and memory, their form flickering with the rain made flesh. When they spoke, it was with a drawl that sounded suspiciously familiar. Well, they said, looking around at the green dawn of their new world reckon, it my turn to wait. The hum answered, low and tight. The figure smiled. Yeah, I hear you. Ledger's still turning. Best not to hurry it. They walked the land, teaching by quiet example. Rivers bent toward their step, trees swayed in rhythm to their hum. The creatures of that world, new and unsure, followed in peace. There were no words for greed or rush or fear. There was no rhythm, only time moving like breath shared between heaven and soil. And though this figure had no name, the rain began whispering one for him. Anyway, the keeper. It wasn't a title so much as a truth. Someone had to keep time steady while eternity learned its next verse. Back in the porch beyond worlds, the cowboy watched the scene unfold.
He looked older now, though age didn't touch him the way it did Morton as it deepened his quiet. His chair rocked slow, his pipe burned low, and his smile, small and certain, was the same. Linda. Always another one, he said, voice rasping soft to the thunder. Always another who listens right. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, eyes glinting with pride. That how you know the world ain't done yet. Long gone someone out there still hums. Time got something worth singing for. The porch lights flickered, the lanterns of stars scattered across his sky. He raised his pipe toward them like a toast. Here to all the patient ones, he murmured, the waiters, the listeners, the quiet keepers of the rain. Y'all keep this old place turning better than I could. The thunder chuckled back, soft and approving. He leaned back in, tilting his hat low, and for a while, he said nothing. The hum carried on beneath him, through him, around him, his oldest friend.
When he finally spoke again, it was to the rain itself. Reckon you don't need be much anymore, he said, his tone neither sad nor proud, yet true. But I'll stick around anyway, never could resist a good storm, and so he stayed. Ages rolled by like distant clouds, the porch didn't rot, the pipe never went out, and the cowboy never stopped humming. He didn't need to. Every drop of rain that fell carried his tune, every quiet heart that waited learned it by instinct. The ledger, vast beyond measure, no longer kept track of gain or loss. It kept track of peace, the kind that can't be bought, only earned by waiting gentle. If you listen now, truly listen, you can still hear it, not loud, not close, but deep under the steady breath of the world. It there in the hush between thunderclaps, in the heartbeat before a hard truth saw fit, in the long silence after forgiveness. It hums through all of it, steady as the rainfall, reminding every soul in every age of the one rule that never changed since the first storm began. Take care of time, and time will take care of you. Porch light flickers once more, the cowboy's shadow stretching long across eternity. He smiles without moving, eyes fixed on the endless horizon. Still raining, he whispers, good, and the hum, faithful and kind, answers back softly a prayer wide at forever. The rain falls again, the ledger turns, and the story, comic radio Torres always begins anew. Out past the horizon where his light thinned into memory, the rain kept its slow conversation with the dark. Every droplet was a word, every roll of thunder a sentence writ in patience. The hum had spread so far that it no longer sounded but a song. It was the shape of all things. Galaxies pulsed to it, stars flickered by its measure, and even silence itself followed its lead. The ledger had become less a rocket and more a pulse, a kind of cosmic heartbeat that steadied the rhythm of eternity. In the small places, with worlds curled up like seeds in the soil of space, the rain still fell gentle. It slid down the faces of mountains that hadn't yet learned their names and whispered through forests that dreamed of their first winds. On one such young world, the hum began again in a way that felt new and familiar all at once. The keeper walked there, moving like wind between moments, listening for where the rhythm stuttered. It was a quiet land, unburdened by memory, and she, because this keeper had taken a woman form, moved barefoot through it, leaving prints that shimmered for disappearing into dew. The rain followed her. It always did. When she stopped beside a newborn river, the water stilled to hear her hum. When she spoke, it wasn't words that came but tone, low and warm, filled with that same ache the cowboy once carried, the ache of knowing you'll never finish what you started and learning to love the endlessness of it anyway. You're learning fine, she said to the river. Don't rush to reach the sea. Take your time knowing the bends. The river answered with a soft swell, ripples flashing silver under gray skies. The keeper smiled. She understood everything that lived was just the rain, remembering its own shape. Nights on that world were deep and long. The stars hummed low above her, each one a lantern hanging over the porch of infinity. Hey, thus she'd sit beneath them humming back, and sometimes, only sometimes, she'd feel a familiar presence leaning against the edge of her thought. The cowboy never appeared clear now, but his drawl still brushed her ear when the wind blew right. "You're doing good work, darling," he'd murmur. "Ledger humming smooth through you," she'd smile, eyes closed, the rain ticking softly against her skin. At me she'd whisper, "It the rain, I just keep it company somewhere far beyond her sky." That old cowboy would grin from his endless porch. That the secret, he'd say, company all eternity wanted. The keeper wandered for centuries without counting. Wherever she went, calm followed. Deserts grew soft with moss. Mountains learned humility. Even storms began to share their thunder instead of hoarding it. Creatures rose and fell, building small worlds within her world. They didn't worship her, they listened to her, same as she listened to the rain. She taught them to hum their thanks instead of speak their needs, and in time they learned the truth the old listeners had before. That wealth weren't gold or power or speed, it was stillness earned through motion done right. Generating past like songs sung in sleep.
Hey, this, the creatures she'd taught, spread across the land. Their hums overlapping the air itself shimmered with harmony. The world grew old and beautiful, covered in rivers that told stories and trees that remembered laughter. When the keeper time finally thinned, she sat by that same river she'd once guided and looked to the sky. The clouds rolled heavy with rain, the same kind that carried beginnings. "Guess it's your turn now," she said softly, and the rain fell to answer. She didn't fade or die. She'd joined the downpour, her hum blending into the eternal song that had never truly stopped. When that rain reached other worlds, it carried her rhythm. Every droplet that landed on soil or stone left behind a trace of her tone, her patience, her care. And in each place someone eventually heard it. A farmer waiting for crops, a sailor listening for tides, a child staring at puddles. They'd hum, not knowing why, and the ledger would hum back through them. One night, back on the porch between worlds, the cowboy looked up from his pipe, but the storm rolled in.
His night could feel the difference in the rain, the new rhythm tucked inside the old one. She did it, he said, chuckling low, taught another verse. The thunder rumbled in agreement, slow and clear. World got a good memory, he said, better than mine was. Leaned back, letting the rain soak into his hat brim. Still, he said after a while, ain't done yet, is it? The sky didn't answer with words, it did hum, that same old tone he'd known since the first drop fell. He grinned, didn't think so. Somewhere deep within that hum, across stars and centuries, the sound of new storms began to gather, the birth cries of worlds still forming, the whispers of rivers learning their first songs, the hush of hearts remembering what patience feels like. The ledger stretched wider to catch it ill, not keeping count, yet keeping rhythm. Every sound that they meant love or mercy or forgiveness found its place in that song. It didn't matter what language it spoke or what sky it fell under. It was all rain, all hum, all one story being told slow enough for forever to understand. Hey, the cowboy tapped his pipe against the railing. Ash fall in the starlight into the dark. Reckon that enough for today, he said, voice trailing the thunder. Rail keeps singing, whether I'm listening or not. But even he said it, he didn't stop humming. The sound rolled through the endless porch, blended with the rain, meeting the hum of the ledger until no one could tell which was which. So the world, every world, breathed in rhythm once again. The rain fell, the hum endured, and the story, like patience itself, refused to end. Somewhere beneath the stretch of a sky that never quite grew old, the hum began to soften again, just a little, the way a voice drops when it's speaking close to a friend. The rain was falling slower these days, thicker, heavier with memory. Each droplet shimmered before it hit the ground, as if remembering all the places it had already been. Whole oceans felt that weight, and side rivers curved with it, taking longer routes just to enjoy the scenery. The universe was resting, but not stopping. It was soaking in. Even eternity needs a moment to catch its breath. And then on that porch that wasn't Lee anywhere but somehow touched everything, the cowboy sat the way he always had, boots up, hat tipped low, pipe in hand. The lanterns above him burned steady. Though it had drifted so far apart, they looked like constellation. He didn't mind. He knew how light liked to wander. He'd watched enough souls do the same. Go on, stretch out, he muttered toward the stars. You'll find your way back soon if the rain calls you. The hum rolled under him, soft at a heartbeat through the floorboards. He tapped his fingers to it, keeping time without meaning to. That rhythm had been with him so long it was his pulse now, or maybe he was just its aid. Hard to tell anymore. He looked out past the railing, watching the rain curve down into the endless dark. Every drop carried a flicker of light, like lanterns falling slow. Still working, he said, voice half a whisper, half a chuckle. still doing its job.
Then, through that soft eternity, came a sound he hadn't heard in a while. A new hum, smaller, higher, trembling, like a young hand learning its first tune. He leaned forward, listening. Somewhere far off, beyond a billion miles of quiet, someone new was singing with the rain. He smiled. Another one picked it up, knew it wouldn't take long. He closed his eyes, following the sound. The hum carried him like a slow river. He could see her small figure standing in a storm that was still learning how to fall. A new world again, all wild green and gold, fresh and stubborn like a colt. The girl was humming low, eyes closed, bare feet sinking in the mud that glowed faint from within. The rain circled her, spiraling, gentle, listening like it had waited just for her voice. The cowboy chuckled under his breath. She got the tone right. Rain fond of her already. The wind shifted on his porch, carrying her voice up to him. It was shaky but honest, full of the kind of courage only the untested have. He nodded along. That's the way, darling. Don't worry about perfect.
Don't worry about perfect.
Rain don't need perfect. It needs true. The girl didn't know what she was awakening. Her hum slipped into the rhythm of her world like a thread, finding its weave. Mountains exhaled fog. Forest rustled with relief. The rivers, once restless, slowed their race to the sea. It wasn't magic, it was remembering. The rain had always known how to listen. It needed a voice to remind it to start. The cowboy rocked back slow, the old wood groaning beneath him like old friends sighing, and that something, he said softly. Every time the world forgets, another one come along and whispers it right back. He puffed his pipe, the smoke rising in lazy curls, mixing with the rain. Ledger don't need pages when it got people like that, writing it by heart. A long silence followed, but it wasn't empty. It was the kind of silence that fills itself. He listened to the hum thread through the endlessness, catching new notes, new worlds joining in. It sounded different this time, not just patient, not just kind, hopeful, as if the rain had learned joy, not just endurance.
Fee smiled wide enough for it to show in his eyes. Well, look at that, he murmured. Rain, learning to laugh, he thought back to all the ones who came before, the wanderers, the listeners, the dreamers, who'd waited under every kind of sky. Their faces flickered across his mind like reflections in puddles. Ira, K.L., Solon, Marin, Wren. Their hums were still in there somewhere, mixing with the new ones. He could almost hear them talking among themselves, their voices carried in the thunderlow murmur. They did good, he said, his grin gently, all of him. Guess they figured out what I was trying to say all along. He reached out, fingers trailing through the rain that wasn't really rain anymore, more like memory made liquid. It slid across his skin like it knew him by name. You've been keeping time better than me lately, he told it. Suppose that how it meant to be. One day you'll forget me altogether and I'll be nothing but another hum hiding in your song, and that all right? The thunder answered, not mournful, not grand, just present. The kind of sound that means I hear you, he nodded once. Good, the rain picked up its rhythm again, gentle and strong. The same eternal heartbeat the cowboy had carried since the first dawn. He leaned back, pipe glowing, a soft smile playing under the brim of his hat. Go on then, he whispered to the storm. Keep writing. You always were the better storyteller. The rain fell harder, each droplet humming the same line in 1,000 voices. Take care of time, and time will take care of you, he laughed. A low, warm laugh that rolled through the thunder like sunlight through clouds, yeah, he said. Reckon that's still the truth. And so it went, forever and then. The cowboy humming low on his porch, the rain singing across worlds, the ledger turning without end. No grand finale, no sharp horizon, just motion, patience, and peace stretching out far they hum but reach. Everywhere always the same song, the sound of time taking care of those who remembered how to wait right.